these scenes, they're 100% as good as they could have been. And that's why I love this movie. Today I'm sitting down with James to talk about one of our favorite movies, The Devil Wears Prada. It's one of the most rewatchable films of the 21st century, not because it's about fashion, but because it's about ambition, identity, and the price of success. It's a film with 4 perfect performances, countless quotable lines, and in which every scene is doing so much more than meets the eye. So today we're breaking down why The Devil Wears Prada works so well and why it can be enjoyed as superficially or as deeply as you want to go. But for now, sit back, relax, and welcome to my film club. So with the sequel coming out in a few weeks, there seemed like no better time to sit down with James to talk about one of his favorite movies, The Devil Wears Prada. So first of all, James, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Dom, thanks for having me.
So we've talked about this for months now, and I think even before the sequel was scheduled, you said that if you were ever to come on, it would be to do this movie, and now it's coming out in a matter of weeks. So first of all, we're going to go into all of the detail, but if you just have to start with one big point, why do you love this movie so much?
Other than the characters and the iconic lines that get shared throughout the film, part of why I love it is just how charming the film is. It's a bit of fashion, it's a bit of camp, and a bit of comedy just thrown together with an amazing soundtrack. And I think that makes a good recipe for a great film, just for that feel good vibe. It's a good Sunday afternoon film, and it's something that is quite comforting. You can be at home, maybe a little bit hungover on a Sunday with fizzy drink in one hand, crisps in the other, Devil Wears Prada on. That's become a bit of a routine, I think. If I'm feeling a bit delicate on a Sunday, this is what I reach to.
Yeah, that's a great movie for that.
When I think about this film, I also think about Coyote Ugly. Okay. There's a lot of films in the noughties that have this kind of like American dream, someone young moving to the big city to try and make it.
Yeah.
It's the kind of cost of trying to make it along the way and losing yourself and all the trials and tribulations. Yeah. Obviously, it's very, comedic, or in some other films, it's more of a rom-com setting. But I think that sort of genre, that was like a time period where that film was like just cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And you could do all these different settings and it's going to be a hit. And I imagine that people making those sorts of films just knew it was going to be a great commercial movie.
Yes.
I think we kind of, us millennials, probably find those quite comforting. It takes us back to that nostalgia piece as well, and hey, a lot of Y2K stuff has emerged back in trend, so it's kind of quite nice to relive it again currently, because you look back at some of the fashion, you're like, oh, that's that's back in, or those sorts of moments are a really great piece.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point on the aging of it, is that obviously you can tell that it's not from this era, because it is 20 years old, which is crazy. Yeah, but crazy. It doesn't look, to us at least, obviously, I don't know how it is to younger people, but it doesn't look old. You know how a movie can take place in the past and not look old? Like, you can have something that takes place in the Middle Ages that came out 20, 30 years ago and it looks shit. But something that comes out now that's in the Middle Ages, like, no, this looks slick. Whereas I think this obviously looks, so that's that. This takes place 20 years ago, but I think it still looks slick by today's standards.
Yeah,
you're never like, oh, that just looks.
Yeah, I think the way that it's shot really contributes to that as well, because it's quite fast-paced. It's like your eye's not on anything for too long, and it has a good energy. So that does kind of help, I think, keep a timeless film.
But even like the fashion and the sets, Casino, which one of my favorite movies, that takes place in the 70s,
right?
And the outfits and the decor and stuff, obviously it's very faithful to how it did look, but it does look a bit gaudy. Whereas I don't think anything here does. Like we don't agree with every single fashion choice, but we're like, that's of its time. It's not like nothing is repulsive.
No, and I think it's kind of got that luxury feel, whether you like the outfits or not. It's got that high-end feel.
Yes,
to
that's it.
It carries it through.
And when you find out the movie didn't have the biggest budget in the world, the fact that they made it look so luxurious with a reasonable budget, I think is quite impressive. Something really important there, you mentioned the characters and the script, which are not too... You can get great characters, a mess script, and you can have great lines. They're not usually great if they're not delivered by great characters. But I think what this movie does so well is combining so many great elements. So I agree with those two. I think the story is super interesting. And even though none of us have worked as the assistant to the manager of Vogue, but we've all had a boss. We've all been in a workplace where we're a bit overwhelmed. And I think pretty much everyone can relate to stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. It's 100% relatable, especially if you work in the corporate world. We've all started out somewhere. And I think this film is really good at keeping a really good pace. Some of the most iconic lines I think it happened within the first 10 to 20 minutes. So you kind of like jump straight into the film, and I think I quite like a film that just really throws you straight in the middle, which is kind of like working in your first corporate job. You just get chucked straight into the deep end.
It is like I think within 10 minutes she started working there. So I love a movie that doesn't dilly dally, that says this is the character, this is what's happening, boom, you're going. And yeah, it is really well paced. It's an hour 45, which we were saying this with Cena yesterday. It's so hard to find a movie well under 2 hours these days, but it never languishes. It just goes boom, boom, boom. I think the story, we'll talk about it in much more depth, but the story is super well paced. It's like, this is what's happening now. This is the transformation she's going. This is where she's at, and now this is what's happening next. And yeah, it's a really great roller coaster. Okay. So this movie came out in 2006. So I was 16, you were 15. I was going to the cinema a lot then. So I think I probably saw it in the cinema, but it wasn't love at first sight. I was probably like, this is a good movie, this is a good performance. And I probably watched it a couple of times in the decade after, but it's probably in the last 15 years. Again, I think being proper grown up, because you watch this as a kid and you're like, oh, they're 10 years older than us, and now we can look back and like, they're 10 years younger than us. So for me it was a grower, but now I think when I started my top 100 list, I was like, oh yeah, this movie's going on there, but for me it wasn't an obvious one. But studying it for this podcast, I'm like, it definitely belongs in my top 100 movies. What about you? What was your kind of journey with seeing it, re-seeing it, and was it love at first sight, or was it a grower?
Oh, definitely love at first sight. I think I had seen this, he said, when I turned about 18, 19, I think. So obviously, yeah, after school, the school years, because you say it's not that relevant to you as a school kid, but as you get a bit older and you start to find out a bit more about yourself, I thought this was just the one for me. I think the soundtrack in particular really makes you love it. I think who doesn't love a film that's laced with Madonna tracks? I think that's a really it's going to win people over straight away.
We'll talk about the soundtrack more in the production, because I have a lot of it's been criticized by some people, but I think it's kind of let's not spoil it, but I think it's kind of perfect for what it's meant to do.
Yeah, I think it makes you want to love it. I think because it's familiar. So I think that from watching it the first time, it was definitely love at first sight for sure.
Roughly how many times do you think you've seen it in your life?
Do you know what? Sunita asks me this all the time. She asked me this earlier this morning, and I think it's somewhere between 15 and 20.
Nice, that's a good number. Yeah, I think probably about a dozen, maybe between 10 and 15 for me as well. It's really hard to know.
Yeah, I think you'd probably watch it at least once a year. So,
I think for anything to be more than 15, 20, it needs to be something that you had on VHS as a kid and you just watched on loop.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had this on DVD.
So another thing I find very important, and this is probably where it lacks a bit for me, is relatability, because I'm not a woman. I actually did briefly work in fashion in the market research part of it, never in the glamorous part. So I have probably a very average interest in fashion. So that's why probably on my ranking it's not higher, because a movie about, say, basketball or Formula One or business, it more connects with me personally. But despite that, I love this movie. What about you? Do you feel a personal connection to the world, the industry, the characters, stuff like that?
Yes and no. Obviously, it is quite unrealistic in the fact that there's an assistant wearing $1,000 dresses to work. That is obviously not very relatable to the majority of us, but I think that the film is relatable in the sense of that when we're at that graduate age and you're trying to make it and you're trying to figure out who you are as a person, and we all go through that transition phase of trying out new things in our early 20s, and I think that's the relatable part of it for me. But yeah, in terms of the actual setting itself, completely relatable and obviously highly dramatized.
Because you've worked in the fashion
yes,
industry.
Whether it's in the fashion industry from a retail perspective, it is fast paced, so there is definitely a element of that. And I watch it thinking that the tasks that she gets put with, you can just imagine some poor assistant having to pick up her dry cleaning and deliver it at 9 o'clock at night. Those things probably do happen in the real world, but fashion that I worked in, very different.
My spoiler-free description of this movie is: a fashion novice aspiring to be a journalist enters the cutthroat world of fashion, working as a PA for the most powerful person in the industry, Miranda Priestly, the editor-in-chief of Runway. So that's spoiler-free. That's the premise of the film. Who would you recommend this movie to? Like, what sort of person at a party, if they told you they liked a certain type of films or in a mood for something, what would they have to say for you to say you should watch The Devil Wears Prada?
I would always say it's an easy watching mood, I think. you might even be feeling a bit delicate. If you've been to the party, I would probably say watch it tomorrow morning when you're feeling a little bit delicate, because it's going to be a feel-good vibe at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's great it can be a light movie, but also when you've watched it a dozen times and you maybe listen to this podcast and you hear more about the more deeper themes and story arcs and stuff, there's a lot of depth to it as well. Like the Miranda character can be seen at a very surface level, but there's actually many layers to her, and I think she's like a fascinating character. So yeah, easy watch, but also I think it has the depth if you want to analyze it further. The movie was released in 2006, and it is based on a 2003 novel of the same name written by Lauren Weisberger. So I'm going to tell you more. So I finished literally this morning, I finished reading the book. So I'll be telling you later about 10 differences between the book and the film. But I'll start off by saying that the book is not nearly as good as the movie. It made $330 million on a $40 million budget. That's something that's so fascinating. This movie looks great and is now considered a classic, but at the time they made it on a relatively shoestring budget. There's stories of certain scenes being cut because they ran out of money. So people who made it didn't really think it was going to be a big thing. There's like, oh, how lucky if we get our budget back. But it was the 17th biggest film in the US that year, and actually the 9th internationally, which surprised me that it did better internationally than it did in the US. Meryl Streep was nominated for her 14th Oscar for this film.
Congrats, Meryl.
She now has 21 Oscar nominations.
That's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. No one's ever going to do that ever again. It was also nominated for Best Costume Design, which I was happy to see, and it features Anne Hathaway. Had obviously been in The Princess Bride, but this was her big break in terms of being seen as a serious actress. As we'll talk about in the character, she had to fight to be in this movie because people didn't see her as a serious actress. They just thought you're just a silly princess girl.
Yeah, I had read that Rachel McAdams was the number one choice.
Yeah, they offered it to her.
And she declined it.
Yeah, 3 times. That's what I read as well. But I have a bit of a theory on that when we talk about the iterations of the script. But then Stanley Tucci was already a known actor, but this is kind of what made him an A-lister. And Emily Blunt was an absolute nobody before this. And I've seen interviews where it seems like this is one of the biggest, rags to riches overnight stories where she was a nobody. And then the day after it came out, everyone knew who she was on the street. For good reason. The director is David Frankel, and he and the cinematographer were all alumni of Sex and the City, which I don't think it's in your face, but once you hear that and you watch it, you're like, oh yeah, I can see how it's similar vibes as Sex and the City. Do you want to guess the Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb scores?
I think critics would have given it a 60-something. Let's go for 65. I've read that the critics were quite critical of this based off how surface level it is of the industry, but I don't think that takes into the account that it's a comedy film at the end of the day. So I think the audience would have given a higher score. Maybe let's go 75.
And IMDb, so out of 10?
6.8.
So IMDb is a 7, so very close on that. Rotten Tomatoes, so the critics gave it 75%, so they did like it more than you expected, and the audience gave it 76, so you were spot on with that. The thing I find most interesting about this part is seeing if there's a difference between the critics and the audience, and here they're very much in lockstep. I mean, I think both of those are quite low. I think this should be an 80 or a 90% movie, personally.
Yeah, I do see a big proportion of fashion lovers, people really obsessed in the industry, having high expectations and watching it. But I don't think the film is necessarily just about the fashion part. I think the storyline is the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I think it does a good job at balancing it. I think it goes deep enough that, obviously we'll talk in depth about the sweater speech. I think that's a really good surface level explanation for people outside the industry. But obviously someone who actually works into it, it's going to be very surface level. But if you go too in depth, then the normal people aren't going to be able to relate to it.
Yeah, it almost becomes, if it's too serious, it becomes a very normal day at work, and I think that doesn't make a recipe for a comedy movie, really. So
now we're going to cross the spoiler line. So that means from now on we're going to talk about the plot. We could talk about the ending in about 2 minutes. So if you've never seen this movie and you're enticed by it, go check it out and then come finish this podcast. If you've seen it before, you can either refresh your memory or stick with us for the next couple of hours. We're going to tell you every last thing you need to know about it, and then watch it with a new, fresh lens where you'll understand every little hidden secret about it. So we're crossing the spoiler line. Now we're going to be absolutely full of spoilers. I always like to start with the entertainment value, which we've already touched upon. What is the first thing that comes to mind to you in terms of what kind of movie is it? Like, first, is it a comedy first and foremost for you?
I think so. I think the comedy value supersedes everything else in terms of the different elements of the film.
Yeah, so I think for me it's a drama. It's like the drama thing is first. The job, the relationships, the moral dilemma she has with work. So for me it's that first and foremost. I think you have to watch it a few times and really dig into that to get to that point. But then the humor, I've gotten to the point on certain rewatches where I'm focused so much on, for example, like, oh, I'm going to really look at the relationship, or I'm going to really try and understand Miranda, that I actually almost forget how funny it is, and then they'll just have their killer lines and I'm like, oh, you know, this is a comedy first and foremost.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that, maybe the first time you watch it, you kind of just get into grips with all the different characters. So it's a very fast-paced movie because you're obviously trying to replicate the fashion industry as a whole. But when you come away and watching it the 5th, 6th, maybe even the 20th time, you're just waiting for the one-liners, these witty comments that particularly Emily makes as comebacks. That for me, I think it's the comedy. That's what I come here to watch.
Yeah, and I think the best moments are when the two things are intertwined. So when someone maybe making a really important point, but they're doing it in the form of a joke.
Yeah, for example, Miranda is really good at being able to put someone down, but then also just make it really funny in the same sentence.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've got it as funny, interesting, emotional. Yeah, I actually, this week, when I rewatched it twice I actually got pangs of mostly around the Nigel stuff.
Yeah.
But that bit at the end when he gets fucked over. I teared up last night when I was watching it again.
Yeah, again, that's almost relatable. Not everyone has been in that kind of situation, but you maybe have heard about someone that happened to someone in the past, and it's so public. So public.
I can't really think of a moment in a movie that more represents a heart-sinking moment.
Yeah, I think actually probably that part of the film is probably the only major twist, I think, as to say, because you're not expecting that.
Yeah, you really don't see it coming. There's no actually there. It's well built. Like the breadcrumbs are there.
Yeah, because in the build-up to it, Andy is trying to tell Miranda about this, this big thing that's going on.
She seems like she's just being oblivious to it, but which I think is a key thing about Miranda. And this is actually one of the things I want to talk with you the most when we talk about the Miranda character, is how much of her obliviousness is real, as in I genuinely don't care about that, or how much of it is fake, as in I know exactly what's happening here, but I'm just going to act this way. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So I said it's all these funny, interesting, emotional, inspiring, multifaceted I have, is that you can watch it and enjoy it from so many different angles. You could watch it as someone who's aspiring to be a writer or a fashion assistant. You can watch it from a business point of view. You can watch it purely from an emotional point of view of the relationships and the friendships and all of that sort of stuff. You can just watch it because you think it's funny. And then another thing I've got, probably the only good thing about Lily, because I've decided that she is my least favorite character, is that this movie, it's pretty, it's nice to look at. I think that is something that's underrated about movies, is that just something it is aesthetically fun to look at.
Yeah, that is definitely a huge part of the film, is the aesthetics. As I said, it's quite hard to find a balance of comedy and aesthetics at the same time, so I think that's quite a clever thing that they've managed to merge together in one film.
Yeah, it can be really hard to be poking fun at it but without going into full satire. So one thing, I don't know if you read this in your research, that apparently in the initial draft this movie was going to be a lot more like Zoolander.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that was the initial idea, so it was going to be much more ridicule. So I think that's where I think of that as like that's a pure comedy, whereas this is really a drama comedy. It's like,
yeah, definitely, it's got it's not spoofy enough.
Exactly.
And I think the element of it being too far the other end will mean that the fashion element is just lost. At the end of the day, they reference all these big designers. There's even some cameos throughout the film, so I think to go too far the other way, the storyline is just not. I mean, I love Zoolander, but the storyline it's
a completely different.
You don't watch that for the storyline.
That is a satire of the fashion industry, whereas I feel like this is much more of an honest portrayal with a comedic side to it. Like, it pokes fun at it, but in a way that anyone who actually works in the industry would be like, yeah, that is ridiculous.
Yeah, there's still a lot of references to the real industry, and it's not too far the other way.
Slightly exaggerated as opposed to being a caricature.
Yeah.
So, moving on to the story. So we're going to go through, pretty much beat by beat. But the thing I like about this movie as well is that on its face, the story is really simple. Is smart, but fish out of water girl is thrown into the fashion industry. She's terrible at the job. she gets better at the job, but as she gets better in the job, her personal life suffers. Then she's left with big moral dilemma of, do I sacrifice? Do I give up on my values to advance? And she decides not to, and walks away from the job, but still having grown as a person, I think is a very succinct way of putting it. So the first scene is the getting ready montage, which I think the first time you watch it, you maybe almost don't pay attention, but there's a lot going on there of showing you from the start how different she is from all the other women.
Yeah, the scenes are just contrasting between her getting a bagel versus the model not eating anything. There's all of those, and it's also quite fast paced in that way, just to kind of show what life in New York is like.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a clever start to setting the scene without actually any dialogue.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So then she gets there, she meets Emily, who immediately makes a snide remark. We meet Nigel very quickly. So that's another thing, we're talking about how quickly it goes. Like, you're 2 minutes in, you've met three of the foreign characters. Then the Miranda arrival, which I can't think of a better way to establish 90% of what you need to know about Miranda, but just watching how everyone panics on her arriving.
The gird your loins is one of the most iconic quotes, isn't it, from the film, and it certainly happens like 5 minutes in.
Absolutely, yeah. So she gets there, and it's one of those, and I love when they do this, is that you see her from the moment she gets out the car, but it's never, I don't think you really see her face. So everyone knows Meryl Streep is in this, obviously, but it's not until the elevator doors open and you get the first full shot of her with her glasses, and it's just like the queen is here.
Yeah, and it's kind of that contrast to the chaoticness of the team around it. But just before she obviously gets out of the lift, one of my favorite bits in the film is when she gets in the lift and the girl gets out and she's like, "Sorry, Miranda."
Yeah. But again, like this is one of the things when you study, I love, that's a well-made movie, is that they use dialogue, but that tells you, like, that's something that could take someone 30 seconds to explain about, this is who Miranda Priestly is. She's the most respected. People walk out of elevator, blah, but you just use 3 seconds of showing that happen. You're like, oh, wow, this. So not only is she feared, but she obviously expects people to behave the exact way and stay out of her way, because obviously the implication is that if that woman did stay in the elevator, she would be in trouble.
I would think that probably some people watching the film may or may not expect that maybe the Anna Wintour that this is based on would be like that, because it says she's very calm, collected, no expression, and highly respected, but also highly feared at the same time. Yeah. It's just a very funny way to be like, of course, Miranda will not share a lift with anyone.
Absolutely. So she gets upstairs. She decides to interview Andy. I've got a few things here that are just questions that we can talk about for a couple of minutes. So
sure.
Why do you think Miranda Priestly hired her?
Because she's not like the other girls, and obviously she came in with the speech of saying, "I'm not skinny, I'm not into fashion, but I'm here to work hard, blah, blah, blah." And I think that was obviously... to be honest, it's the shortest job interview I've ever seen in my life. Of course. It is a bit silly, I think, that part of the movie. It's like, you wouldn't hire that much. You'd do a few more HR checks.
Well, so this is where... So obviously this is different from the book, and I'm going to not try and plug the book all the time, but the way I see it is when there's something that's not contradicted in the movie, but that's not said in the movie, you can assume that what was in the book is true. So she actually mentions the fact that something from HR sent me when she meets Emily. So in the book, you actually have her initial interview with HR, and then she gets sent down to Emily, and then this pretty much happens. So the implication here is she has done a pre-interview, and this is sort of a final interview with Emily, and then Miranda says, "You're incapable, let me do it." And she hires her. Initially, she's not going to hire her. She says something and sort of poo-poos her away, and then Andy has that moment where she stops, turns around, and then says, like, "I'm not fat, but I'll work hard, blah blah." So what I've got there is, obviously she's different from all the other girls, but I don't think that in itself is a selling point. It's the fact that, the whole, "Oh, you don't read runway, you don't know who I am, and you have some balls on you," and I think she kind of likes that about her. That's what makes, because I'm sure all the other women were kissing her ass in the interview.
Yeah, she stood up for herself in that moment and really got her point across. I think it's that. I think that's also quite relatable for graduates when you go for so many interviews when you first finish university, and it's a lot harder than you realize that it's going to be, because it's your first time stepping out in the real world. And I think it's kind of, sees a bit of desperation in that speech, but also putting yourself out there,
and she's authentic. She's her real self.
Yeah, so in that very moment, I think.
And but I think the reason why I think this question is important is because I do think it shows that Miranda is a much deeper character. She's not just doing these things willy-nilly. Like deep down, even though it might seem that she didn't think, that she was oblivious of her before, and that she stopped thinking about her 5 seconds later, I could see, and I'm not saying this is true, but in my mind, her brain is like there's 100 things going on all the time, but she is thinking about everything, and she understands how important having an assistant is. She understands the fact that they've all been a disaster, and one of the reasons is because she picks a look rather than the quality in a person. So she's like, okay, well, let's do an experiment with this person who is supposedly smart, even if she's fat, and she has balls on her, which obviously she doesn't want someone that's going to talk back to her. Do you think there's any part of her that's like, oh, this girl thinks fashion's a joke, I'm going to break her?
I think so, because at the end of the day, her leadership style is quite ruthless.
Yeah, I mean, it's sink or swim.
Yeah, and she commands a lot of respect through some of the jobs that she gives her. Throughout the film, you kind of see all the coats being dumped on the desks every single day. It's quite degrading in a way.
Yeah.
So her leadership style is, I am up here and you are down here. It's very hierarchical. So I think that she, in that moment, without saying anything, in response to Andy's monologue, but then hiring her shows her that I'm going to give you a chance, but I'm not going to explain why.
Yeah, which is obviously her whole management stuff. Yeah, I guess maybe she's not going in with I'm going to break her or she's going to be great, but she's like, I'm going to try something, and if it breaks her, good. It'll prove the fact that I was right to not hire people like her before, but if it works, then good for me as well. Yeah,
for sure. And I think obviously Miranda's job is in the film, to have the best eye in the fashion industry.
Yeah.
So in that moment, she was just showing her eye for talent.
Absolutely. So then she tells the friends that she got the job. So we're introduced to Lily, Doug, and Nate, who we will talk about later. But their dynamic there, the dynamic between the four of them is introduced. The fact that it's all a bit silly. Everyone makes jokes about it. Andy makes jokes about it. So very much setting the foundation, because basically the movie is her work life and then her personal life on the other side and how they grow apart. So I think it's an important scene in its simplicity to just be like, this is the starting point. Like, oh, we're all laughing about this.
That part for me is still one of the last bits where you see Andy kind of slating the fashion world. This was not her dream job. And obviously her friends agreeing. So it kind of sets the scene on who her and her friends and her boyfriend are at the moment. But overall, you don't get a very good sense of who our friends are in this stage, really. I think you say that part of the film is quite minimal, I think.
Yeah.
But as you said, that's one of the last bits where Andy is the old Andy.
Yeah. And I think just for our listeners, viewers who are being reminded, the whole point is that she wants to be a journalist, a serious journalist, but she's kind of fluked her way into this interview, and what she's been told is that if she spends 1 year working for Miranda Priestly, she can then basically have any job in this industry. So the idea, which they go much more in, is the whole 1 million girls would die for this job, and they go into this more in the book. It is the idea that what would take her 5 to 10 years of working her way up somewhere else, she can kind of leapfrog that, which I think is an important thing to state, because at the end of the day, it is a shortcut. So when she's kind of left with this is so hard, is it worth the sacrifice, everything, it is at the end of the day a shortcut. The idea is that she's gonna get a huge payout from doing this. It's not just, it's meant to be hard, otherwise everyone would do it. So that's just important context. Then she has her first day. I realized this when I was making this list. A lot happens on her first day. So she starts off at 6:15 with a call from Emily. She gets the coffee. She gets told how to work the phones. A very important thing, Paris is introduced really quickly with the background on Emily's thing, and she tells her about Paris. We immediately know that Paris is going to be an important plot point.
Yeah.
Then I really enjoy the can you spell Gabbana the first time that she's on the phone and then gets hung up.
Left to her own devices far too quickly, it seems.
Then she asks her to go get skirts, and so she says, what skirts? And I note to this, Miranda only smiles twice in the whole movie, and this is it's like the weirdest, most twisted smile. She's like,
that she can't quite believe that an assistant has asked her a question.
Yeah, exactly. And then she goes to lunch for the clam chowder, where she talks with Nigel a bit, and then the run through happens, and then we're at the sweater speech. So I think we're probably less than 10 minutes into the movie, and we're deep into her first day. So the sweater speech, which before we go into it, I noticed something on the last rewatch, is that there's a lot of shots of people's faces, but without them saying anything throughout the whole movie. And I think it's really, really good, well done. And it adds so much. And so during the speech, there's a couple of shots of Nigel just looking on, sort of in a watch her work, or like, oh, you're being, because you can see the people around, I think, are thrilled about the fact that Miranda's not having a go at them, but also watching the master at work, she's doing her thing. And similarly, Emily is in the background kind of watching it. You sometimes see she's just a blur, but she stood there the whole time. So everyone is watching her just berate Andy.
Yeah, there's in that first sort of scene, there's so many quotes just from that. As I say, and it does really give you that glimpse into the day-to-day life and the kind of naivety of Andy straight away kind of laughing at.
Yeah, because it started with the two belts, which they are different. I don't know what she's talking about saying they're the same belt.
They are very different, and I would argue that with anyone who says that they're very similar.
They're the same color, that's it.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously at that point the outfit that Andy's wearing in contrast to what's being, they're throwing all these dresses around, and Andy's wearing this big, bright, lumpy blue sweater and cerulean blue. I mean, that outfit is a choice, but obviously is done for a dramatized effect. But I can't imagine any young 21-year-old rocking that around New York, to be honest.
Someone who has no fashion sense.
Yeah, and I think the film is quite good at using the costumes to like dramatize things, make it more polarized between Andy before and after.
Yes.
Because you say that jumper and outfit together, no.
But yeah, we can talk more in the quotes about our favorite parts of it. But the speech is basically her explaining, and this is something that I learned in my experience in the fashion industry, is that if you don't know anything about it, you see these fashion shows and they do see completely disconnected from the real world. And what is the point? Because very few people, literally a dozen people in the world, might ever wear an actual look that's on the runway because they're so extravagant. But she explains very well about the fact that it's a trickle down. Basically, the stuff that there is then used in the haute couture collections that very rich people buy, that then trickles down, eventually getting to like Primark and Zara, and and then even Tesco's or Morrison's or Old Navy or even Walmart, like the absolute bottom of the barrel in terms of cheap stuff that you would assume is nothing, as her sweater is, which just came out of a discount bin, as they say, that was in some way influenced at some point, and she just says it. Obviously, it's well written, but it's just so well performed. Someone in the review just says every word is accentuated perfectly in that monologue.
Yeah, it does give you a good insight. It's a very simplified view of obviously how these decisions are made, but yeah, it's an artist expression at the end of the day, that they are obviously selecting for a magazine for public consumption, and yeah, it's quite an iconic way to just kind of put Andy in her place in that moment and really show her what the industry is about in the space of about 10 seconds.
And she still doesn't really, I feel like the viewer will understand there, or anyone will be like, oh yeah, this is actually kind of important, but I still think it takes a couple more things for her to understand the importance.
Well, yeah, I think after that bit, she puts on those shoes that Nigel gives her immediately and throws those black ones away. But yeah, it does take her a while, I think, to understand the role in itself. And you do see that in a few scenes later. But yeah,
I love the bit when I think it is on that first day, where she just looks her up and down, and she doesn't say anything, but it's basically what she's saying is you need to sort yourself out. That is one of the things about where she is a bit annoying at the beginning, because the fact that she's obviously, it's important to look good at a fashion magazine. Like, you shouldn't. Like, that's kind
you're not
of
exempt,
obvious. Yeah. And so when Nigel is like, no, you're not trying. If you were trying, you would look better. You would put more effort into it. So that's all the first day. Then there's the first, because he was obviously in the previous scene, but then the first scene with like one-on-one with Nate, where he's making her the $8 sandwich. And again, we'll leave the Nate stuff for the character section.
Later, yeah.
But then there's the shit at her job montage, which is that's where it's like funny. I mean, this is probably one of the funniest bits. It's just her giving all these like random jobs and just basically screwing everything up. These picking up the dry cleaning, driving the Porsche, walking the dog.
Patricia.
Yeah, Patricia. But then I think, again, well-made movie. It ends with her taking a phone call and connecting it through, in which, as an assistant, you'd think after a day or two you'd be good at it. But it is okay. It's immediately showing a progression. Is that we've just seen that she was out of her depth. We've just seen her be bad at stuff, but she's at least got the hang of the phone call. So it's kind of step one in her competence growing.
Yeah, we start rooting for Andy at this point, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that point is like, okay, well, she is trying, because if she was just shit at her job for the whole movie, which is kind of what happens in the book, it makes it really hard to root for the person. And then she has that conversation with Emily, where she's like, that's a really fun one to rewatch, when she's just being all nice and naive, and Emily's just like on a completely different wave. It's like, yeah.
I think she, meant to come across as that bitchy kind of a workmate colleague that's just not really going to show her the ropes.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of funny that she wants she needs an Andy to succeed, to be able to go to Paris, but she is not willing to help her.
Well, she does. I disagree. I do think that I think she does help her Like there's times when she says, okay, you do this, I'll do that. Like I think the first day when she
Yeah,
comes
there's a
out,
bit of that.
she tells her these are all the things she said, and she's like, okay, I'll deal with everything, but you take care of the skirts. And then she's like, well, why me? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, do you have something better to do? So I think she's definitely ruthless. But I mean, I think she understands that, again, sink or swim, the only way Andy is ever going to be remotely competent is that she needs to be, you know, she can't treat her with kids' gloves, on top of the fact that she has her own work to do. But I think for her, she's like, okay, I'm going to help you to make you competent because I want to go to Paris. And also she says, I'm going to get in trouble if you get fired.
Yeah,
so I
no,
do
you're
think
right.
she has a stake, but she is like, we're not going to be friends. So when she tries to be all pleasant with her, well, again, we'll talk about it with Emily Blunt because I think she's just amazing at making Emily likable, even though she's a bitch. But I do think, especially when you rewatch it, you understand how stressed out, underfed, sleep deprived she is. That I think basically all of her behavior, because none of it is, she never goes out of her way to be mean. She's just not nice. Like she's like, I don't want to talk to you about this. Then there's the dad dinner. And then the whole Miami jet situation, which again is, it's a bit of a, it's funny, but it also gives you anxiety watching it.
Yeah, I think obviously that's where you start to, that's the first point where her social life is starting to, you know, detract, and her work life is starting to take over. So she's got a work phone all of a sudden, and she's being called all hours of the day to meet Miranda's crazy demands. I don't know what the word for it is, but yeah, crazy, we'll go with that. Trying to get home through a storm in Miami. Would you even want to be on that plane? But it's just silly. I think it's just quite a camp way of being able to show how, you know, the demands from Miranda are just so unrealistic at this point. And, you know, we can't move mountains here, but Andy is expected to.
So I fact check a few stories. I'll do this at the end of the story. And this is one of the things about, you know, whether this was, because I was just wondering, especially from reading the book, and a lot of these stories, they're in a different order and they're used differently, but a lot of stories like that are in the book. Weirdly, in the book, it's actually a story about Emily having to do the Miami jet thing with the same result. But some stuff like that I've looked into, and so I'll tell you about that later, about whether stuff like that has actually happened. But here's my next question. What should she have done? When you look at the movie across, you're like, oh, Andy made a lot of bad decisions. But if you take them one at a time, like, what was she going to say? Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm out for dinner with my dad. She'd have been fired the next day.
Yeah.
So she kind of did the only thing she could do, like, and she tried.
Yeah, as I said, you can't mess with airspace. How is she going to get her home? I think she did all she could in that moment, which is obviously the most heartbreaking bit about it, because obviously the aftermath of that is even worse. Yeah, obviously we get to see a turnaround point in that, but I do think that, yeah, within that moment, I probably would have quit. That would have been enough to send me over the edge, actually.
But I think it's in, because obviously what she was asking for was ridiculous. It was impossible.
Yeah,
and we know that
impossible.
we know that Andy did everything she could. If she had just not tried, she probably would have gotten fired. And this is one where I don't think Miranda was doing it on purpose. Like, I don't think she was manipulating her knowing it was impossible. I think she truly wanted to get home. And her whole point is that she asks the impossible, but by sometimes asking the impossible, you actually get it done. And I guess it's an interesting parallel between the Miami story and then the Harry Potter books.
Yeah.
Because the Harry Potter books was seemingly as impossible as the Miami thing, but then when she actually manages to do that, that's another turning point of like, no, you're now hyper competent. If you are Miranda Priestly, what are you going to do? Like, well, I want to get home. Am I not going to get everyone I know to try to get me onto a jet or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she is the, you know, top person in fashion. Someone should be able to get her home. She knows everyone with the private jet in America.
So,
but
I feel like obviously Miranda it's meant to be, oh, it's funny how ridiculous she is, but she wanted to get home.
She wanted to go to a twins recital. You know?
So,
as a mother, you would obviously want to do anything you can to be there. But yeah, unfortunately, the weather had other ideas, and that was a big setback in the film for Andy.
But I'm realizing it's saying it. Obviously, the next day she tells her off, and she says, like, I'm disappointed, and it makes her cry. But in this case, she's sad, and she's obviously the fact that she's sad makes her a little bit angry at Andy. But she doesn't say she's going to fire her, but does say you're going to need to up your game. But later on, before the Harry Potter thing, she's embarrassed because Andy has seen her get in a fight with her husband, which that was Andy's bad. She shouldn't have gone up the steps. She shouldn't have intruded on it. So there, out of spite, she gives her an impossible job. And I think when you look at, especially when you rewatch the movie, after the Miami thing, the dressing down, that's when she goes to Nigel and gets the pep talk. She needed that kick in the butt. Even though it was impossible, she needed to be shown that she is going to be expected to do impossible things. Yeah. And that's when Nigel gives her the pep talk, which is just so good. And the girls would kill, I've got in the quotes, but girls would kill to work here, but you deign to work here,
Yeah.
which I think is great.
And it's also the is it this kind of CEO of the publication in the lift? There's a scene earlier on in the film where he goes, 100 girls will kill for that job.
Yeah, so that's
and she doesn't quite realize that yet, and doesn't quite understand what she's gotten into.
so that
or
line is
appreciate it.
in the book is maybe not 100 times, but it's used like dozens and dozens of times. And it is an iconic line, but it is only said 3 times in the movie, which I think is the right use of it. Is that you introduce it, you hammer it home, you finish it. But yeah, and I also think this is, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think I made a note that this is when she stops whining, because up until this point, you know, she whines to Emily a little bit, she whines to her friends. You obviously in the book it's written first person, so you can see a lot more what's going on in her head. But I truly think from this point on, even though she's not thrilled about it, Andy is like, she's done with whining. Maybe sometimes she's not happy about like the Harry Potter book. She's obviously like, this is hard, but she doesn't say, oh, she's crazy, she's a bitch, whatever. She just gets on with the mission, and obviously it works. Whereas in the book, literally until the end, she's constantly whining, calling Miranda a bitch, and it's much more one-dimensional and negative.
Okay.
So I really like that this is like, okay, we're done being, like Nigel said, we're done being children now. Let's just get on with it.
I think you see that point. Andy is looking to, how can I get her respect?
Yes.
How can I get Miranda's respect? Because she can't do, if she does something right or she does something wrong, there's no reward. And I think that's quite a good lesson sometimes.
Yeah.
For us all.
Well, and up until this point, she hadn't done anything right. In fairness, she still was dressing like a slob. She was, you know, that's why I think the montage of her being shit at her job is so important, because she's clearly still out of her depth. You know, the coffee's probably coming in cold. She's probably turning up late for stuff all the time. And now this is when she starts becoming good at her job. Obviously, symbolized by the montage of her outfit changes.
Yes, it seems like at that point in the film, dressing like you want to be here is going to command the respect. I think that's the message.
Absolutely. And so we get the first makeover with Nigel, and then we get the outfit montage, which is, it's such a cool way they film it, of like her walking in New York and the cars driving past and changing the outfits. It's
a very cleverly done in the fact that it kind of shows that she's had the makeover. She's got really committed. It also a good way of showing how time is passing in the film.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, and also as well, it's being the soundtrack to another
iconic
Madonna song. I think we're about half an hour in and we've had 2 Madonna songs at this point. So as I said, it's quite comforting as a viewer that, you know, you feel quite, you know, upbeat and along with Andy as a character as she's having a transformation. So again, I think this is another point where we really like Andy as a character, and you're really like, right, she's arrived at work, she's here, she's going to do a really good job and really impress Miranda and get her respect at last.
It shows that she's buying into it. She's like, I'm going to give this my all.
She's invested, because as I said, that the message so far has been, so many people would love to do this job, but you are moaning about it.
Then the next scene, very interestingly, is then her friends being a dick. So when she arrives at the bar, gives them all the free stuff, and then they take her phone away. This one gives me so much anxiety.
Yeah. Her friends are so ungrateful in this scene.
Yes, yeah, it's the double thing. It's the fact that she's just giving them all the free stuff, and then they don't take her seriously.
Yeah, and also her friends in that moment, we find out kind of what some of them do. And they also have, you know, professional careers and so on. So yeah, it feels like they weren't very fair in that moment. I think
Here's something I think is interesting. The first time you watch that, the way it was written and stuff, I can't tell what the people who made the movie are trying to tell us. Are we supposed to take away that, oh, Andy's a bit uptight? Are we supposed to take away that her friends are being dicks? Or are we just supposed to take away that they're just growing apart? Like, no one's really at fault here. They were just being silly and she was being too serious. So yeah, how do you, because I think, to me now, because I think the more you watch it, the more you side with Andy. Now when I watch it, all I take away is, no, Andy's 100% in the right. Her friends are being dicks. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree. I think from the first time watching it to watching it now, I still think the same, because I think your friends should be a bit more supportive. Obviously, everyone's at that age where you're kind of growing, and you either grow with your friends or you grow apart. And I think, yeah, it's a very short scene, so it's obviously very.
I think it's a pivotal one.
But it is also, I think, the job to make the film more interesting. Have the contrast for her friends has to be there, otherwise everything's just fine and dandy, and it's not very good entertainment. So the fact that there is that contrast of her friends, you know, not really fully supporting her, or you know, really getting her having to fit in and changing herself. They don't really. I think they were a bit kind of worried about losing the real Andy. But
See, I read it slightly differently. To me, it's a case where the four of them are like you, Sinead, and Sam. Like, you're good friends, you've joked around, you've known each other, and you can see us. And they obviously were very jokey with each other. That's the thing. That the first scene, they're all joking about how much they all hate their jobs.
yeah,
So they obviously think, oh, it's funny, we're gonna delay her call by a few seconds, but they don't realize that if she doesn't pick up, she's going to get fired. So it shows a disconnect. But I don't think they're doing it. I genuinely don't think they realize the impact they're having on her, which is why they do it and they think it's fun and silly. And then they're like, geez, she's really stuck up. But they don't understand. And I think this is one of the key things I'll talk about with Nate, is I think he never understands. He never understands her motives. He never understands what she's going through, which is why they're completely disconnected later on. And it's silly by them, but obviously it's meant to say that before this job, she was the sort of person that would have found that funny.
yeah, maybe I do. Yeah, I do see your point. I agree. Maybe that element, that scene where she gives them the phone and the bag, and then they all of a sudden treat her badly, but without them really knowing the full impact, is that contrast against her.
Yeah.
They've made her friends look like dicks.
It's one more thing that makes us like Andy, because she's not the sort of person that you're immediately like, oh, I love her, she's the best. But these little things, like her becoming slightly better at her job, and then her friends being misunderstanding her, makes us be like, yeah, leave our poor girl alone.
Yeah, for sure. I think again, it's that rooting for her. You can feel her pain because you've seen
it,
but her friends haven't.
Exactly. Yeah. Then she goes to the James Holt party where she meets Christian. We'll talk about him later. Then she starts getting better at her job, so we just see her being good at stuff. Learns about the industry. I think that's a cool scene when Miranda goes to the James Holt presentation and the whole pursing of the lips.
That's one of my favorite shots.
Yeah.
That's the thing with Miranda, is you don't need any words. Her face will tell it all. I think Meryl Streep as a whole is just really good at doing that. But in those little moments, it's really funny. And to be fair, that red dress wasn't very nice. So, fair enough.
Yeah, I've got it in my notes on Meryl Streep. It must be one of the all-time great, just like facial performances. Like she does so much with so little. I think those are the scenes that maybe you kind of forget about when you're focusing on the personal stuff or the drama. When we're talking about the fashion industry, there's that scene, and then very shortly after, there's a conference room scene where they're talking about the next issue of Runway, and they genuinely are just having a conversation about a photo shoot and stuff, and it's 50, maybe 60 seconds, but it is super interesting just to be, you're basically a fly on the wall of one of their really important meetings just for a minute, which is very cool.
After the James Holt showroom piece, Miranda asks Andy to do some tasks. I like to say, book me for lunch, I think it is. And Andy's like, already done that. Already done this. And she says, right, well, you can bring me the book.
Yep.
And that's like that's quite a key moment where you think that Andy has, she's on top of everything.
Yep.
She's got the look on. She's got, the task list down. She's really doing very well at work.
She's leveling up.
Yeah, she's being trusted with the book, which obviously is a key moment because they say there is a reference to the book, I think, earlier on in the film, which doesn't seem that important at the time, but now we kind of see the real kind of importance and the kind of hierarchy between the two assistants, and it's obviously a good key to be like, Andy has, kind of really submerged herself into the role now. I would say that the bringing the book to Miranda's townhouse is possibly one of my favourite scenes in the film, because, as I say, I think if you've ever done something embarrassing at work, or maybe outside of work, but if you think about that scene and what happens in that scene, it makes me feel immediately better. Because, as I say, the townhouse is ridiculous. Of course it was going to be. Of course there was going to be lots of different flowers, and, it wasn't going to be as straightforward as Emily.
I mean, yes and no. Like, just... when I was watching it yesterday, I was like, just put it on the first table. Like,
you were actually watching it being like, just over there, just put it down and leave.
That was really dumb of her to go up the steps when Emily had told her specifically not to do that.
Yeah, I think even watching that film for the first time, I just knew something bad was going to happen. Everything was just too nice at this point.
Yeah.
And I think, something bad is going to happen. And the townhouse bit is a really iconic scene, I think. And what went through her head to go upstairs and deliver it on the floor, I don't know. But yeah, she got misled by those naughty twins.
Yeah, very naughty. So she walks up, she sees Miranda in a fight with her husband. Again, that's something you don't really... they're having a fight, but you don't really pay attention until you're watching it for the third, fourth, fifth time.
Yeah.
So the exact conversation is that they obviously had a date, and she got held up at a photo shoot, and she didn't have access to her phone. I think she says we're in a shoot, I couldn't call.
Yeah.
And then he says, everyone was looking at me thinking, there it goes again. He's like ditched her. So he's been embarrassed in public, which weirdly similar. Actually, I'm realizing it as I'm saying this, but the parallel is really strong between what happens with Nate later on with his birthday, because I'm sure the big thing at his birthday, he must have been really embarrassed about the fact that his girlfriend wasn't there.
Do you know what? I've never thought about that either. Actually what is happening to Miranda happens to Andy in some vague way later on in the film. I've never thought about that before,
as I said, I hadn't either until I just said it.
I wish I thought about it, because it's actually, I think it's because the conversation is so quiet and you're just so worried about Andy in that moment. You're just like, that what Miranda's saying is irrelevant. You're just worried about this book being put on the floor.
I do. Again, that is really, obviously she gets caught. The anxiety is building up to getting caught, and then once she's caught, you're like, okay, well, she's caught just to get out of it. But I mean, she does the physical comedy really well of just sort of squirming and then realizing she does the book.
She's like made the worst mistake, but she just can't. She can't go back.
She can't go back in time.
It's too late. I did actually do some research on the townhouse.
I heard some. So I heard about this is that they struggled to find one because a lot of the fancy townhouses didn't want to piss off Anna Wintour, so they would refuse to let them rent it. But what did you find on it?
So I actually found that the house that they use in the film sold a couple of years ago. It sold in 2023. Do you want to have a guess on how much for?
$30 million.
Close. It's 26.5.
Nice.
Neo-Italian townhouse.
Nice.
I don't know what that means, to be honest, but
it's obviously got the old bones of an old townhouse, but it was very modern and nice.
It was and obviously there's a couple of scenes in the film from that townhouse, and it's a beautiful view. I think does that seem quite realistic, do you think, for the editor-in-chief of Vogue?
I think
so. For New York? Yeah, maybe. One of my pet peeves in a film is when the character in the film lives in the most ridiculous house that's just so unrealistic for that person living on that sort of world. It's obviously they go for the aesthetics, and it maybe goes a bit too far. Whereas I think actually where you see Andy's house and Miranda's house probably feels quite right. I think they got that bit right. I think.
Agreed. So then Miranda is mortified. So the next day, she doesn't actually address it with her. She doesn't say anything to her the next day. She just tells her that she needs to get the Harry Potter book.
Well, that's classic Miranda. At this
point,
She doesn't tell you.
It's that's it. Emily's the one. Emily obviously gets wind of it, and she's the one who vocalizes it. And you say, what does she say? Is that you might as well have jumped into bed with them or something?
You might as well have jumped into bed for a bedtime story, something like that. Yeah.
But so Miranda basically says that she wants the Harry Potter book, which sets up one of both of our favorite scenes.
Yeah, the Harry Potter manuscript, the most unrealistic demands, utilizing obviously it's playing on Andy's part of wanting to be a journalist. I think it's quite manipulative in a way of being able to show me what you've got in that moment, and really putting her to the test with a completely unrealistic task. But as you said, is it unrealistic? That's what we find out.
Well, apparently where there was a will, there was a way. Again, let's just put ourselves in Miranda's shoes for a second. What would you do if you're that person and you've just been embarrassed like that? I mean, it's a two-way street. You're basically saying, she says, if you don't do this, you're fired. But she's also giving her a chance. It's like, okay, you've got a massive con in your column now, so you need to be really good at your job if I'm going to keep you and overlook the fact that you've embarrassed me. And she gives her the thing. And it's not as though once she gets it, then it's like, okay, we're even. She's really impressed that she gets it.
Yeah.
So, I think, again, Miranda kind of spot on. Great management skill.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think Miranda knew that it wasn't 100% impossible, but I think it was really that was a kind of do or die situation for Andy.
Oh, it definitely was.
And obviously she does quit at that moment momentarily.
Yeah.
While she emotionally trying to figure that out. And obviously she calls Nate, and Nate is obviously very pleased with her, which I think we'll obviously talk about Nate, but Nate isn't very, he's actually quite pleased in that moment for her and supportive.
But I kind of sympathize with that because it's two things. It's what is he going to say? Oh no, you shouldn't quit when she's miserable. But it reminds me of, it's like when someone gets out of a relationship with a toxic ex. It's like, and you obviously if you didn't like, as a friend, you didn't like the ex and they break up. It's like, oh, I'm so happy you finally ditched that person. And I think that's why it must be really hard for him when she gets the job back to be like, oh, I was so emotionally invested in the fact that you've quit, and it turns out that you haven't.
Yeah, with the kids' science project again, it's just another layer of her.
Oh yeah,
the lack of work-life balance that Andy has, but it is a good moment to, when she turns it around and
Yes.
even gets it on the train. And
yeah, that is so one of my favorite things in movies. I say this on a lot of the podcasts, is basically seeing someone. It's logistical achievement is how I define it. Is like when something runs smoothly or someone does something in a really good, efficient way. So the fact that they show her doing the work, getting the manuscript, and then telling her that, oh no, of course I've had these copies bound and sent. Here's another thing that I'd always had in the back of my head, but Sunita brought it up last time we watched it. You know how she's in the office and she says, oh, what am I supposed to do with the one copy?
Yeah.
And she says the two, and then it cuts to the girls on the train at that point. Is the idea that the girls also got an earlier train? Because I think she tells her, I need the manuscripts on my desk by 3, which is when she does, but the train doesn't leave until 4. So I think it would be pretty clumsy to think that it's a flash forward, because it shows the train and then comes back to the office. So I think it's supposed to show that they actually left earlier, but Andy anticipated it. So she made sure that the copies were sent to the house a couple of hours earlier, got to the girls, so they had it on the train. Because that's why Miranda is so impressed, is because not only did she achieve this thing, but also I didn't tell her that they're going to leave on an earlier train. Because if she'd been like, because I think this is where Miranda is sadistic. I think this is like, she's not going to manage it. But if she manages it, I'll be like, oh, why have you got 1 copy? We need 2. But if she had gotten 2 copies, she said, okay, great. I have 2 copies. No, it would have been, well, I have two copies here on my desk, but my girls got the earlier train. How is it going to get to them? So it's like, on top of getting it done, Andy anticipated 2 or 3 levels. Because like you said, it's the lunch thing. The important thing that Andy needs to do to be competent is achieve anything, but almost more importantly is to anticipate things that Miranda wants, or how she's going to want them, that's unexpected. And I think that's what she does in that thing there. Is like, I'm going to achieve the impossible, but also, because again, they talk about this more in the book, Andy is connected with the chauffeurs, the nannies, the cooks, and all of that. So what probably happened is that maybe she texted the nanny and was like, oh, what time is the train leaving? And she found out that it was early, so she made sure that everything, because that's what Miranda wants at the end of the day. If she got her perfect assistant, it's someone who's going to anticipate everything and just minimal communication. So yeah, that's why this scene is probably like both one of our favorite, is because that is the pinnacle of her competence.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good moment in the film. It's also quite nice as when you're wanting to watch a feel good movie, seeing someone doing a good job. It kind of I think it just releases a bit of serotonin in your brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
You feel really happy, and it's almost aspirational.
Yeah, no, it is.
We all want to work like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
So Miranda, when she gets it, is stumped and does probably her most. She says that's all, but it's the closest in the whole movie that she comes from being lost for words.
I think it's also, she says that's all quite a few times, as in a bit of a dismissive way. Whereas in this moment, it's like, actually, you've done everything.
Yes, that is actually
there
all.
is nothing else left at this point. It's kind of puts her back onto the top bit that she was on earlier in the film, when she had already pre-thought of what Miranda wanted and got that sorted. So it kind of feels like we've gone down and we're back up again to 100. And
then, but although interestingly, even though this is kind of the ultimate great thing that she does, it isn't the thing that puts her over the edge. That's obviously at the gala, but we're not quite there yet. So then they have the Nate quitting celebration scene, which is a bit sad.
Yeah.
Then there's I really like this one, even though it's very short. It's a Central Park photo shoot. I think, again, there's a great song. It looks cool. It's a nice little moment between her and Nigel.
Yeah, it's a nice little moment where you can see them two getting on, and Andy just kind of cracking on with the job. But I think when you look at some of the models in some of the shots, what are they wearing?
Yeah,
it's kind of, obviously it's dramatized for effect, like they're in the middle of Central Park, dressed as tigers.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's not very fashionable when you look at it close up, but it's almost a little bit culturally inappropriate when you look at some of the things. But I think that does tease onto some of the things that were on display in some of the publications, is just that kind of eccentric.
Have you watched the America's Next Top Model documentary on Netflix?
Yeah, I have watched that.
So that when I watched this last time,
much that.
Yeah, it's that kind of ridiculous, over the top. This is what fashion is.
Yeah, it's like I told Tyra that I was scared of cheetahs, and now the next day you have to dress as a cheetah in Central Park.
Yeah,
this very much feels a bit like that, but it's just a very small detail in the background, I think, that kind of just actually gives some sort of glimpse into
what is
into the fashion industry in a way, because
And
at the minute Andy's just been doing admin.
I think also I think it's one of the only times you actually see Nigel actually doing his job, because when he gives the pep talk, he's just looking at pictures in a room.
Yeah,
and other times he's just in meetings, whereas
yeah.
here he's actually running the shoot. I also think you mentioned the conversation. They go back and forth about stuff. Like, it's stuff that's still gibberish to us. Like, he's like, oh, the shoot, this or that. But you can just see that Andy knows exactly what he's talking about. She's on the level. I've got it as this kind of cements her competence. It wasn't just the Harry Potter thing wasn't just because you could say the Harry Potter thing was a lucky fluke because she just happened to know Christian.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with fashion, is it? Really?
Yeah, but she was kind of lucky. But this is just showing you that she sort of gets it now, and that she's like fully immersed.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's obviously not many scenes like this in the film, and I think this is where the critics say it's quite superficial and very surface level for the fashion industry.
But I think they nail it. You have the James Holt meeting before with the pursed lips. You have that shot, and then the very next one is the meeting where they're talking about the next issue, where they talk about the photo shoot. Nigel makes a good recommendation, and to me, that's 3 scenes where there's like in the foreground you're getting the fashion industry, and there's a bunch of stuff in the background, like the whole, obviously you have to kind of think about this to get it, but the whole idea of James Holt, who's obviously a fashion designer for probably one of the big houses, who then spun off into his own, it's very Tom Ford.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he's quite kind of meant to be the Tom Ford.
Exactly.
Because that was very much, the Tom Ford Gucci era was very much.
But a lot of most new houses in the last 50 years, they started off being a designer for one of the big houses, and then they built their name on that. And so you get glimpses of that throughout the story. So they have the board meeting. Interestingly, I'm pretty sure this is the only proper scene that Andy isn't in, because all you see is them talking. Emily comes in with the plague, and then she goes off and speaks to Andy. So it doesn't mean anything, but it is interesting that they decided to show us this, because obviously most of the movie is from Andy's point of view, but this is the one scene they were like, we're just going to give you 2 minutes of this is how these meetings actually work. And I think it's very important beyond being interesting, because it just shows you how competent Miranda is, because that's the thing in the book that's so annoying. At no point does she acknowledge Miranda is really good at her job. Like, she runs this ship really well, and obviously we know that in the movie and it's acknowledged by people, but just to see her commandeer a meeting and commandeer people's respect and manage the room, I think is super interesting.
Maybe if obviously the book is, I guess it's based on someone's experience, isn't it?
So she's not seeing.
Yeah, so maybe if you're the assistant, maybe she just didn't see those sorts of meetings, I think we need that for the film, just to actually get an idea and to actually make the setting a bit more interesting.
But I'm sure the author of the book was in many interesting meetings and could have given stories of, at one point she like saved this photo shoot by like doing this or that or whatever. But that's not the focus of the book. The focus of the book is that this woman was a bitch and my life was miserable. Wow, 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 wow.
In the book, did the Andy character, did she get as much free stuff? Because that's one thing that I'm not too sure whether the assistants would have got in real.
It's actually worse. So yes, she does.
Okay,
and
good.
She actually goes out of her. She actually steals. Well, they're supposedly allowed to take stuff for themselves. So that's
like there's no lines.
But I think in the book she crosses the line, because at one point she takes stuff out of the closet and then sells it on eBay for a few $1,000s, which to me is what you're not.
That is a sackable offense.
Yeah. So she very much, and she keeps all the clothes from Paris in the book as well. But I'll tell you more about that later. So Emily's sick, and that's when she decides that Andy is going to come to the gala. Again, I mean, completely reasonable decision on every front there for Miranda.
Yeah.
I think they're lucky that she didn't send Emily home and say that Andy would do it all by herself.
I know. If this happened at post-COVID, Emily would be
in quarantine.
In quarantine at home.
So I think it's a cool scene. So the gala with her saving her ass by remembering it, and again, just showing. And the thing I really it's these little details to me that make this movie, like, for me, it's a 5 out of 5. Is 2 things. When Emily tries to find it, Andy waits the perfect amount of time. Like, she gives Emily 10-20 seconds as they approach, and then she swoops in just in time that it's not obvious, but without being like, because if she'd gone in too quickly, Emily would have been like, I was about to get it, and you did that to try and undermine me, but she didn't. She gave her the chance, she jumped in, and then reciprocally, Emily could have said, oh, you're kind of what she does with the Paris thing. She could have been like, oh, you're trying to make me look bad, but she says, thank you, you saved me. So I do think there's a really nice moment of camaraderie there between the two of them.
Yeah, there's not many of those in the film.
No, but
that's a good one.
But it's one of the reasons why the Emily character works so well, is because it's like, she's not a bad person. person. At no point does anyone think Emily is a bad person. She is a girl who would kill to be in that position, who's at the absolute end of her.
Yeah, this is the sort of things that Emily came to do for the job, but it's obviously in the contrast. Andy really didn't want to go to say, of course the gala is on Nate's birthday, you know, of course it's inconvenient. Obviously it's kind of sets it up quite nicely in the film. But yeah, and they also, in terms of costume, they're all wearing black dresses as well, which I think kind of, it makes a good, you know, it all looks quite nice and cohesive at that point. And I'm assuming that is supposed to represent the Met Gala in real life.
I guess probably. So they were, the Met Gala wanted nothing to do with them because again,
of course,
no one was. So just to reiterate once and for all, the designers, models, buildings, they wanted nothing to do with the production because of the fact they didn't want to piss off Anna Wintour, which, having read the book, makes a lot of sense because the book is horrible about Anna Wintour. There's no nuance there. It's like she's the devil, and obviously everyone knew about the book when the movie was even in production. So everyone just thought if it's anything like the book, Anna Wintour is gonna hate it, and we don't want to piss her off. And even if it did end up being the way it was, like even if everyone could see it, the end product, they'd probably better to err on the side of caution and not pissing off. In the end, Anna Wintour did go to an early screening and claims that she liked it. I at first read that and thought, bullshit, I bet she's just saying that. But having read the book, I doubt Anna Wintour read the book, but I'm sure she got wind of what was in it. I think
her assistant read it for her.
Probably, yeah. That would actually, that would be so funny. But I can imagine that with the context of the book and the fact that Meryl Streep played her, the fact that it's a much more nuanced thing, I can definitely see why she would have preferred the movie than the book.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it is meant to be the Met Gala, but the Met Gala wasn't going to let them film there in the building or on the night or anything like that.
Yeah, because I was trying to wonder if that was the case, because it kind of looks like it could be the Met Gala, but obviously the Met Gala is just what we see it.
Yes.
In terms from,
I don't think it matters. It's just the point is it was an important.
It was a
night.
big gala.
Yeah, and this is one thing. I know someone who, not an assistant, but who works very close to one of the biggest CEOs in the world, and he has assistants that do exactly that thing of learning the book. This guy works in the entertainment business more broadly. He has assistants who watch pretty much all the movies and TV shows out there, so that then when he bumps into people, whether they're producers, directors, studio heads, they can tell him, he can talk about any movie or TV show, even though he doesn't watch any of them, because he's been briefed on it, which that's where it kind of gets almost psychotic, I think, of being fake.
That is quite, it's not genuine at that point, but I can understand why you don't have time to watch these things. As a CEO, you've got much bigger fish to fry.
I think this is the right level of being someone helping you remember who everyone is and quickly give you context.
It feels like it makes sense. Like, it's, as a viewer who has no idea of the fashion industry, you kind of you would expect maybe this sort of thing to happen.
I think this would be in any industry if you're a CEO. Like if you're a big banker going to a conference and you're meeting 100 people a day, having someone help you, like, oh, this is so and so, he's the marketing of so blah blah blah. So that again totally makes sense that Miranda needed that person, and Andy does a great job at saving it.
Yeah.
Then she leaves in a rush, sees Christian, turns down Christian's invitation to go for drinks, which before we even get to Nate's reaction, like, obviously this is where I think this, again, is a pretty nuanced scene. Is obviously, I think it's fair that Nate is sad that she wasn't at his birthday. Yeah. But also, the fact is she did leave as early as she could to come back.
Yeah.
But then
she even turned down a networking opportunity. And there was decision was made in that split second. You're like, oh, but yeah, I think she obviously made the choice.
I think in hindsight, she should have taken the meet. I think in the movie it would have looked bad because it was like, oh, you're even later for Nate. But I think the whole point of all of this is for her to get this job in publishing afterwards. Yeah. And maybe this was her opportunity. I mean, obviously the whole idea is that if she did a good job, she'd get the reference and she wouldn't need the connections. But I think an argument could have been made, hey, I'm sorry I'm late. I had to take this meeting because that's what I'm here to do. Yeah. But she didn't. So,
and also as well, she's quite comfortable in the position with Miranda at this point. So, the connection with someone from publishing, which could go either way or, not be useful at all. She's already got Christian at this point. She made the decision, I think, just to she prioritized Nate in that moment, even though
Nate didn't care. He's sad.
Yeah.
Again, well, we'll talk about it more in the broader context of Nate later. But yeah, do you have anything to say about that scene in particular?
I think obviously he is sad, but he also says that he's not. He said it's okay.
Well, he doesn't say it's okay then. It's later on he says, I think it's when they break up, she says, oh, you're still mad at me about the birthday thing. And he goes, no, I'm not a 4-year-old. I got over it. But I don't want to come across like I am going to be defending Nate because I think I'm not defending him overall. I'm not saying he's a good person or anything. I think the narrative about him being the absolute worst, being the villain of the movie, has gone way too far in that direction. And I think a scene like this is that any normal person would be sad in that situation, even if, I mean, we've all been there, even if you understand whether it's a parent missing your birthday or a partner being late or forgetting something. You can be the most understanding person in the world, but you're still a human being with feelings. And I think that's the point there, because he doesn't actually say anything toxic in that scene.
He doesn't really say a lot, to be honest. I think
he just says she looks pretty.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I think he's obviously just
upset
and doesn't want to talk about it. But we don't get many scenes with Nate overall. So yeah, as I say, he does get painted as a villain. There's not a lot of airtime.
No, there isn't.
So
I actually thought
those sorts of these little moments are all we get. And it can, as you said, they're quite negative in most cases, so it kind of does paint the character.
But they're negative from Andy's point of view. Like in that case, it should be. We know that she turned down the opportunity, so if we're being completely biased in her favor, we're like, well, he should be grateful that she got back and that because she tried so hard. But I haven't done this. I think it could be quite interesting if you just stitch together all of the Nate scenes. And so it would be like 7 minutes, the whole movie. And even that, I'm sure you'd be like, oh yeah, you see things, like you wouldn't see any of the Andy stuff. You would see everything from his point of view. You'd be like, oh yeah, this is, and I'm going to keep this for the Nate bit, but there's one really important bit relating to this, which not completely changed, but I think is, if you watched it just from his point of view, is like quite a key moment. But yeah, here's another thing I want to say about this, the cupcake scene. I watched one of those YouTube videos that Nate is the worst, Nate is the villain, blah, 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 blah. And they just rattle off all these things that he'd done. And one of them is, he stayed up waiting for her just to go to bed when she get back, just to make her feel shitty about it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I was saying to Stina, I was like, no, it's just kind of what you do when you live with your partner. You just make sure that they get home safely. Yeah. And then he's like, well, now I'm tired and I'm going to bed. I don't think he was doing it.
We don't really have enough context, do we? Like, well, he was obviously waiting at, it's New York City at the end of the day, like, and they live in a small apartment.
Yeah.
Like, you would, like, I would do that for my partner.
Yeah,
you would
exactly.
wait up because they say this is 2006. We don't have iPhones. We can't track, you can't be like, oh, this is my PIN, this is where I'm at. You have a flip phone, you've got to wait for someone to come home.
Even if you had the PIN, like, unless there was like, okay, well, you're downstairs. But I mean, you could argue if you
kind of still wait up, really.
Yeah,
but technology's better, but it doesn't solve the problem completely. But
if he had just gone to bed, it would be almost more passive aggressive. So it's just, I think when you go down the he's the worst thing, and you hear people, I sometimes think if you want to disagree with someone, you just kind of have to look at how ridiculous some of their arguments are. And if that one of your biggest thing is that he was being passive aggressive by staying up, I'm like, okay, if that's one of your main arguments about why he's toxic, I think we need to kind of look into it more. So again, we'll talk about that more later. In the fallout of the gala thing about her saving the day, Miranda says that she's going to be going to Paris.
Yeah.
She does try and push back, but Miranda does correct me if I'm wrong, Miranda does basically say, if you don't do this, you're fired.
Yeah.
So she's not giving her a choice, which again is fair. Miranda, it's not a debate club. She's not like going to take into account who wants it more or whatever. She has made a decision that her more competent assistant needs to come.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the end of it.
It's quite a big switch up at that point, because I wasn't expecting, you don't expect that in the film, because you say Emily has been there so long, but obviously Emily has been dropping the ball slightly maybe not through reason of her own, she's been sick, but in fashion, I think the showing up and being there and showing what you can do is all that really matters. If you show that you if the world will still continue, if you show that everything's going fine without you being there, you might be considered as less favorable. And that's, I think, in that moment you kind of see an example of that, where Andy is present, she's committed, she's there, and she's therefore worthy of going to Paris.
Yeah, I mean, because Andy's competence is shooting up, like she's nailing everything, and then at the end of the day, Emily did forget that name of the person, and if Andy hadn't been there, it would have put Miranda in a very awkward situation. So I can see the logic.
Yeah, and there's also the bit where she has to make the phone call, where
that's
where
tragically funny scene.
Yeah, but Emily is saying that she forgot to do something, and she's like stressing, running around New York trying to get a load of Hermes scarves, which is obviously a great scene for a car crash. But yeah, I would say that's probably you kind of get the sense that Emily is a bit frantic. In that
Yes,
moment.
yeah,
And,
she's kind of losing. And
Andy's about to make that 10 times worse.
And I do think, again, if you actually stitch together just the Emily scenes, yeah, she definitely does devolve. At the beginning, she's kind of got her shit together. And I do think it's obviously the job just takes its toll. And obviously they do, it's a joke, but her diet is really bad. So it makes sense that she would start being forgetful and become, so as Andy is becoming more competent, she's probably becoming a little less competent. So Emily, she makes the phone call, Hermes car crash. She has the whole hospital conversation with her. We'll talk about this more in the Emily thing, but I do think Emily's a bit harsh on her here because she would have done the exact same thing as Andy in her situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she's just been hit by a car. She's medicated. She's in hospital. I'm going to give her a pass on being a little bit upset in that situation.
Also, as well, just to go back to the Hermes scarf scene, obviously, it's a comedy film. Obviously, when something like a car crash is a horrible thing, how do you make that funny and fashionable at the same time? And it's like, why don't you just throw a load of Hermes scarves up in the air, and that will give us the image of Emily being hit by a car, and that's how we know that it needs the next scene.
Obviously, it's not. I'm sure it's a stunt person, but someone did get hit by a car, and it is. I think you see them
you
roll
do
onto
see
the
a
windshield.
But you just see a little bit, and then the scarves. And I just think it's just.
Do you know the origin?
Kiss.
Do you know what the Hermes scarves is a reference to?
No.
So in the book, one of the staples of the Miranda Priestly character is that she integrates Hermes scarves in every outfit that she has. So sometimes she uses it as a belt, sometimes she ties it in her hair, sometimes she'll have it around her neck or whatever. But apparently she loses the Hermes scarves all the time. So they're constantly buying her new Hermes scarves. So apparently she treats them like handkerchiefs. So you do, I think in Paris, you see a box of the Hermes boxes in the background. Obviously in that scene. There's quite a few Easter eggs in the movie. There were clear references to the book, and that's a big one. But I did on this last watch, I was like, I wonder if they did that with Meryl Streep's outfits. And maybe there's the odd scene where she's wearing a scarf, but they don't. So it would have been funny if they had managed to get a Hermes scarf into every outfit. But yeah, that's what it's a reference to.
Interesting.
I think one of the reasons that they didn't put that in there like more explicitly is because one of the themes in the book is how wasteful Miranda is. You get a little bit with the food here, but it's so much worse in the book. And so it's the idea that she's buying these $400 scarves and just leaving them everywhere. I mean, the waste is really bad in the book, but obviously there's things like that they've taken out because they don't want you to see Miranda as a bad person.
Yeah, it's got to stay on the comedy trail, isn't it? So
I mean, you could have made the food, when they throw the steak in, that always breaks my heart because it looks like such a delicious steak.
Look like
that's the only time that they really embrace the waste.
Yeah, and that task in particular was just used as a to add extra pressure to Andy to get the Harry Potter book. She didn't even want the steak. I think Miranda knew she didn't want the steak.
Okay, so we don't know in the movie. In the book, that does happen, and what happened there is that she was called into a meeting with the CEO, which is what happens in the movie as well. She says, I had lunch with so-and-so. So in the book, the idea is that she was called into a meeting and it turned into a lunch, so it wasn't actually done on purpose. Right. But she gets mad at her because didn't his assistant tell you that I was doing this and cancel my lunch? She still gets pissed off at her. But it's not just I'm asking you for food, but I know I'm not going to need it. So it's more ambiguous in the movie.
I thought it was just added in for just to keep layering on because the Harry Potter books is one thing, but it's just kind of.
But then going to a restaurant,
that's not the only thing that's going on. Yeah. So I thought it was kind of done in just to.
I think you can see it in both ways. Like again, there's a funny surface level thing of just making it harder. But if you actually dig deeper onto it, it is very possible that she meant it at the time and then her plans changed. But obviously, what's she gonna do? Call her and say, "Oh, by the way, I don't need lunch anymore." A normal person would, but obviously Miranda Priestly would never do that. Yeah. So Emily accident showdown. Then there's the art gallery scene. Christian kisses her on the cheek. Lily sees it, is a complete bitch about it, in my personal opinion. Because what you would do is you would go up to your friend and say, "What was that all about?" And then she would explain what it is, and that would be it. But instead, she just walks off with the absolute worst interpretation of the situation. It's like, "Oh, you're a cheating whore." Obviously, Andy should have probably pulled away or whatever, but it's not like she kissed him. It's not like they made out or something. Christian kissed her. She let him, in fairness. But it's a weird reaction to just storm away. And Andy's the one who has to run after her and try and explain herself.
Yeah, no, I think what I think of that is that Christian, overstepped a line. Obviously, all he keeps referencing is le boyfriend, which is very creepy. So I think ultimately you hate Christian in that moment for just overstep, making Andy feel uncomfortable. Obviously, he's done something quite nice for her in terms of getting the Harry Potter manuscript, and he knows that she wants to get into journalism. I think he's kind of like leaning into that to try and like, win her over in some way. I don't want to think about what he wants to do. But, you don't want to think about that. But yeah, I think Lily's reaction to storm off is you would want to talk to your friend.
Yeah, it's not very supportive.
It's not supportive, but again, it's that kind of there's a lot of mystery about her friends that we don't really get to see in the film.
I mean, I think Lily is very one-dimensional as the judgmental, non-understanding friend. More than any of the others, plays that role. And I think this is actually the last scene you see with her.
Yeah, I think if you were to make a remake of this, I would like to see more of the friends, and like even if it's good or bad, just to kind of
give them more depth,
show the contrast between her work life and outside.
And the reason why you don't even know this, but the reason why that's particularly why you're very right is that in the book, Lily is she's actually a bigger character than the boyfriend. The boyfriend's completely different, and there's a whole story with Lily's background, which is she's clearly, even though she has the same name, she's clearly meant to be a completely different character here. So that's not one where I would assume she has the same backstory. You'll understand this more when I tell you about the book. But anyway, so that happens. Then Nate turns up. He overhears about Paris. He rightfully says, I thought Paris... Again, this is one where some people might think that it's being toxic, but I think it's a completely fair comment to say, wasn't Paris a big deal for Emily? But then she gets pissed off at him.
It's just the wrong moment because obviously Nate comes in. It's like she's got people coming at her all directions, giving her grief effectively. She's had she felt uncomfortable from Christian approaching her. Then Lily's stormed off. Then Nate's asking questions. She's obviously reaching a bit of... She's also got the pressure for a job. It's kind of like a bit of... she's reaching a boiling point.
It's a clear point in the movie where like basic movie structure where like everything goes to shit, and that's pretty much what's happening here.
Yeah, that's where her personal life is as Nigel references going up in smoke.
Yeah. So she's due a promotion.
So she's due a promotion, and there it is. Paris.
So they break up. She goes to Paris. You say you love that the scenes of her just being in Paris.
I'm trying to remember which bit comes first.
So first there's just a general like her in the car, then being at the fashion shows, just having a grand old time, and then later on it's after she slept with Christian. After she sleeps with Christian, that's when she's like running after Miranda trying to warn her. But the first there's like 2 minutes. There's like 2 minutes in Paris of just her living her best life, which is it's a little break after all the tension for the last 10 minutes. It's like you just kind of bathe in Paris with her. There's the Valentino show and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the Paris bit is quite good because it shows that Andy is kind of almost a different person at this point because she's taken Emily's opportunity off her in some way, even though she says she was given no choice.
And she's enjoying it.
It's almost like you feel like you want that reward. She's worked really hard for Miranda, and she should deserve a little treat. As you say, she's drinking, partying, enjoying it all, but
sleeping with Christian. Yeah,
so it's just a contrasting point to where is Andy now a different person? She's quite far away from her friends and her boyfriend. And obviously, there's the build up to obviously she's on a break with Nate, and she spends the night with Christian. Which I think she probably wakes up and regrets, but it kind of swiftly moves on to her discovering about the takeover of Vogue and what we later find out as Miranda's kind of and Miranda's always one step ahead. I think that's something that we always see consistently through the film.
So just to recap, is what she finds out with some documents and stuff in his office is that the CEO of the company that owns Runway basically wanted to bring in a younger editor and replace Miranda, kick her out. But she finds this out and then tries to warn Miranda. But then it turns out Miranda already knew and has orchestrated behind the scenes to move the woman who would have replaced her into the position that she had created for Nigel and that he thought he was getting to save her bacon.
I feel like that is something that would definitely happen in the real world for sure.
Yeah, and it's weird because I think at first the parallel between that and what happened to Emily seems a bit drastic. Like, well, no, this is so much bigger. But I was thinking about it again. If she hadn't, the whole point is that if Andy hadn't agreed to go to Paris, she would have been fired. If Miranda hadn't done this, she basically would have been quote unquote fired. Obviously, she has a lot more opportunities than Andy would, but for her, losing Runway would have been the same as Andy getting fired. So even though it's on a whole other level, I completely see where she comes from.
Yeah, as you said, if you ever watched there's a documentary with Anna Wintour, and I think it's been on Netflix. Yeah, you kind of get to see the empire that Anna Wintour has built, and it makes me think about that part of the film where Miranda hands this sheet of paper to the CEO of these are all the people that will follow me. So you take me out, the whole of Runway will collapse inside of it. And I think that's a good part of where you see the empire of Runway, which is just, you know, Miranda,
and
irreplaceable in that effect.
A little detail in that is that if you note the wording it's not this is a bunch of people that I've intimidated into staying with me, or, you know, blackmailed.
Yeah.
She says these are people who I discovered, nurtured, and who support me. So again, that little she is someone who because we never actually see her interact with the creatives, but it does show that she's got this softer, nurturing side for creative people, which obviously is not. I mean, I guess Andy is technically creative because she wants to be a writer. But my point is, there's a way that could have been a lot darker. That these people that, you know, that she'd gotten to sign contracts and that she said she wouldn't work with them if they didn't sign this contract or whatever. So yeah, it's a massive power move. And obviously it epitomizes what you need to do to thrive in that industry. And ultimately, Andy makes the very admirable decision of deciding this is not a person that I want to be, which is her personal decision. But I don't think you can blame someone for deciding that's if Miranda wanted to be Miranda, and she is, and she's sticking to her guns, I think that's fair. The whole point is that Andy realized that she never wants to become that, so she needs to cut her losses. And so let's spend a minute on that meeting scene, because I think that's the one that almost makes me well up now. And again, this is a perfect example of the way it's shot. The people who are shown in that scene is obviously Miranda, Andy, Nigel. Christian is there, sat next to the woman who's meant to replace her. The CEO he's the one who's been blackmailed with a list is there, as is James Holt. So that's 7 or 8 people who at various points, their facial expressions do so much. I actually think the most interesting one is before she announces it, you see Nigel look over at James Holt and do like a really excited thing.
He's ready.
And James Holt, but he knows that he's been like fucked over. Then you see the French lady and Christian looking all excited.
Yeah, there's almost like a competition. There's more than one person in the room think they're going to get this announcement.
Yeah. And then she announces it. Obviously, and that's the thing. All we focus on is Nigel. There's actually the shot of him, his face dropping, and he's sort of in the background. But I think it's really interesting to just watch her face, and it's just really good acting of being sort of like shocked and sad, and then looking over, and then you look over, and Christian actually looks like he's just been kicked in the nuts. It's actually really funny, because even though he's a side character to it all, he was obviously very much interested. He was going to become like the head of editorial or whatever. And then James Holt is obviously just he's like clapping, but he feels really awkward and terrible about it all. But yeah, next time you watch it, you'll see like there's shots of every single one of them at key points, and through it all, Miranda is just up there being like cool as an ice cube.
Yeah, as it's said, it's another one of those scenes where the people in the background are actually telling the most about what's going on.
And there's a million things in this movie that they could have made this movie with a slightly less good script, with slightly less good actors, with slightly best direction and camera work. But these are all the things that take you from, you know, in my mind, a 5 out of 5 down. This movie could be a perfectly decent 3 out of 5 star movie, but it's not. It's the stuff like this, these scenes that are just so they're 100% as good as they could have been. And that's why I love this movie.
I think as well that this movie can be seen quite cheesy in some ways because of the comedy involved, but there is
you can just glaze over a scene like that. It's like 1 minute, but if you're actually in it and you're in the emotional weeds, you're like, oof, that's really...
those moments I think do bring it back, and it's that balance. I think that's why I love this film also.
And then speaking of great scenes, the car scene.
Everyone Wants to Be Us. The sunglasses, obviously a clear reference to Anna Wintour.
Yes.
You know, it's a really great moment. I think I've never quit my job that way. Have you?
No, no, I haven't.
But it's a very, fun way. Throwing that phone, that bloody ringtone that we've listened to throughout the whole film. I was really ready for that phone to go in the fountain, to be honest. And that was a really good moment.
It's an iconic ringtone.
Yeah, it is. I can hear it now. Yeah.
The whole "I see myself in you." I feel like the first few times I watched it, I always thought that was really cheesy because it seemed silly because she's still obviously such a different person.
Yeah.
But upon analyzing it, because when you prepare for a podcast like this, you really go to a whole different level of analysis. And I was like, actually, and we even realized it talking about it today, the whole relationship thing, that is, there are strong parallels. And then you see the parallel about the Emily thing and the Nigel thing. And even though it seems crazy, because she's not saying that she's anything like her now, but the idea of saying, oh, you remind me of me 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It does actually make sense. I think that's a very powerful bit. And then, obviously the ending. Do you know the story behind that? The Everyone Wants to Be Us. That originally the line was Everyone Wants to Be Me. But Meryl Streep in the moment said, that makes it too self-centered. And Miranda does come across successfully. obviously she's very self-centered and self-important. Well, she says in that speech about the fact that she basically tries to say that I didn't do this because I'm a narcissist. I did it because the magazine would suffer. Now, there's a little bit of bullshit in there. I do think it's like, but I also love doing this.
Yeah.
But it does seem like she believes in the industry as a whole. It's not all about her.
Of course, yeah.
So when she says everyone wants to be like us, she's not just talking about her. She's like, everyone wants to be me. Everyone wants to be you. And everyone wants to be James Holt or whoever, or even Nigel. Like, despite getting fucked over, he's still doing this amazing job. So I think it's a great line. And it's a perfect watershed moment because Andy's like, no, I don't actually want to be us. Yeah. And it's a perfect breaking point in the movie.
But she also has that realization from Miranda that she made a decision.
Yes.
You know, she made that decision to overstep and take Emily's opportunity from her to better herself. I think that's kind of the moment where Andy realizes enough is enough.
Yes.
Maybe I've lost myself a little bit along the way, and she, it's gone too far for her at this point, and the kind of glamorous or maybe a not so glamorous tasks that she's been given has kind of blindsided her in a way, and it's put the wool over her eyes, and she's now realizing that that she's maybe made a mistake, or she's just kind of gone a bit too far, and she really wants her old life back.
I've got a lot of notes on this when we go into the more deeper on the characters, but basically she's changing in really small increases. So which is completely normal. And this is one of the themes that I've read about, is about how an institution gradually changes you, whether it's a business or politics and all of that. But I think in a way she got lucky that the whole Nigel thing, that's such an escalation. It's such a big thing that she's like, whoa, I never want that to happen to me. Because the truth is, obviously you need this for the movie to work, but if you take this purely from a human point of view, if that had never happened, if they'd never tried to remove her, she could have kept working there for a couple of years, and then maybe she takes a job at Runway, and before she knows it, she is Miranda, because it's all these 1% steps, whereas this was like a 50% escalation. And I heard this once in a business coaching thing. It's about you've got your comfort zone, your stretch zone, and then your breaking zone or something like that. And it's the idea that you don't want to always stay in your comfort zone. You need to stress, but if you go too far, then you break, whether it's stress or or you're incompetent. And I think that's what happened here, is that so far everything was putting her outside of her comfort zone into her stretching zone. But this was like, no, this is way too unethical for me. And so in a way she was lucky that she found that out early and she managed to get out sooner, because the problem is someone like Nigel, he's too far gone. Yeah, I'm sure he would love to tell her to fuck off and quit, but he's invested his entire life into that, and he would blow everything up. So his whole reaction, obviously he feels exactly the same way Andy does, but he's like, but I don't have a choice.
Yeah. I think it's kind of, you're so sucked into the industry. I think Andy makes the decision to get out.
And
she's getting out all she can.
And the first time you watch it, you come away being like, oh, Andy did the right thing. She's a good person. Miranda's a bad person. That's the very first thing. And I think that's the way you're supposed to see the movie the first time.
For sure.
But then when you rewatch it, if Andy had said, no, actually, I do want to be you, so fair enough, this is what I'll do, you'd be like, a very different movie. But you'd be like, okay, cool, you've made a choice. But the fact is, Miranda basically said, you have a crossroad here. You can either become me or you can walk away, which is the implicit thing she says. She goes, cool, I'm going to walk away.
Yeah, I think it's a good part of the film, I think.
Yeah, it's one all-time great showdown in the movie. So that's the car scene. Then she goes back to New York. Nate reconciliation. Do they get back together, her and Nate?
It's hard to tell. They leave it on a
ambiguous.
Yeah, obviously he's moving to Boston.
Yes, and the interview she does after is a New York paper. So she's staying in.
She's staying in. It's quite good at setting the I'm staying here, you're over there.
Yes,
and he's leaving it as, I'm sure we'll make it work.
Yeah, because when I watched it, so 2 times I watched it in the last week. The first time I thought, wait, they actually get back together, and I was a bit annoyed. But then when I rewatched it last night, I thought, no.
Yeah, I'm not sure they do.
It's more, I think, I've heard it, some people speculate, probably she goes to visit him once or twice, and then they realize they are still different people, and then they break up. But which I think is kind of the perfect way. Like, it didn't need to be a full break. It's nice that they smooth things over.
Yeah, and I think if they did get back together and it was all that happy hour, that was a bit too, it's already the film's already cheesy.
I hated, when I thought they did get back together, I hated that, because this happens usually it's when usually it's when someone in a romance movie has to choose between two people. The answer is usually neither.
Yeah, that's true.
So I feel like here it's like the choice between Nate and the job. The answer is neither. It's like you need to get away from both, because both were bad in their own ways. And then she has the interview, gets the job. That's really, That actually, I think I got emotional that time as well when the guy says, "Oh, she said I'd be the biggest fool in the world if I didn't hire you." I was like, because
Yeah, nice little
yeah,
twisty ending.
and
to
then the ending, and then the ending was she sees Miranda, and then she looks at her, which is as close as you're gonna get to a wave. But then she does the second smile of the movie. She does a little smile in the car.
Yeah.
But then
The acknowledgement.
Exactly, and then a second goes by. She's like, "What? Drive."
Yeah.
End of movie.
Also, as well, the bit just before that where she gives Emily the dresses is quite a good.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good moment as well where obviously
good.
not. It shows obviously what the film is really good at showing is just how time passes quite consistently. Obviously, Emily has just had the car crash, so she's obviously being filmed with a broken leg on crutches, which obviously a complete juxtaposition to how fashionable she looks.
Yes. She still looks fashionable, but just with the crutches.
It's just kind of quite funny way of making someone who obviously is so obsessed with fashion be hobbling around on crutches with a white cast on her leg. Obviously, that's obviously it just shows that it's not long after this part happens not long after New York.
You're great to shout out that scene because I had forgotten it, but because it is very important. Because when Emily finds out that she's not going, she does specifically say the thing that she's most miffed about is the clothes.
Yeah,
and by giving her the clothes, Andy's basically saying, "I know this is what was most important to you. I'm sorry," and it's a good way of making up.
Yeah.
So we finish the story. So there are 3 things that I decided to dig in. One of my big things reading the book and the movie, and as I said, a lot of the anecdotes about the tasks were in the book. So I wanted to check, are these factually based on things that Anna Wintour or someone else might have asked? Okay. And it seems like, roughly speaking, no. The 3 things that stuck out were the Harry Potter manuscript, the Miami flight, and then the general stories of Miranda Priestly humiliating people in public. So the Harry Potter manuscript, there's no evidence on the 3 of them that they exactly happened. The Harry Potter manuscript, people have said that people in the industry do get advanced copies of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it does seem very plausible that someone like her would ask for a book in advance. Obviously, Harry Potter, they kind of just took it to the extreme of asking for it. It's not clear how long before the book comes out they're being asked for it, but asking for the biggest book in the world at such short notice is obviously an extreme version of that. But the point is that wasn't a real story. And also in the book, Andy is asked to get the Harry Potter book and fails to do it. So that's one of her failures, actually, instead of... But I won't get ahead of myself because I'll take you through all the differences in a second. The hurricane flight, again, wasn't a real story, but assistants have said they were frequently expected to solve logistical problems that were effectively impossible. Yeah. Which is what that's meant to illustrate.
Yeah, I think that seems very... I think when you watch that bit, it seems very
But like we discussed, I just feel like if you were in the Miranda position, you would just push your team to do everything you possibly can. And because the only way, it's kind of the Steve Jobs, the only way that you got to shoot for the stars to hit the moon type of thing, by pushing people to do stuff. Maybe they won't get everything done, but they'll definitely get more done than they ever thought they could do.
Yeah, it's consistent with her character.
Absolutely. And then the public humiliation, this was more in the book than in the movie. Apparently, a lot of people say that Anna Wintour isn't known for outspurts or screaming, but she's very much more... People who worked at Vogue say Anna Wintour was certainly intimidating, but her reputation was for cold precision and high standards, not the theatrical cruelty shown in the novel. Yeah. So, which I guess, and that it kind of seems like in the book she exaggerated this more to make her more villainous, and then Meryl Streep, whether it's because she was inspired by the real Anna Wintour or just a performance decision, decided to make it more the Ice Queen than the, screaming Cruella de Vil type character, which I think was a great choice. Yeah. So, as I said, I read the book. It's about 400 pages. I don't think it's a good book, genuinely. I think it's a book about an interesting topic, which is why they optioned it for a movie before the book was even finished. I'll talk about this more in the script, but they basically heard about the book, read the first 100 pages, and were like, oh, let's start working on a script before they even finished it. I find the best way to kind of highlight this is just to go through 10 differences. So first, there's much less character development. You know how we talked about in this story, how well they do that. She comes in, she's naive, she's innocent, she's incompetent, she's a little bit competent, she is then super competent, she takes over Emily's thing, and then she realizes she doesn't want to be there. Like a very clear-cut story. There's none of that in the book. She's basically just whining, barely competent the whole movie, and then she ends up going to Paris for different reasons, and the ending is more to do with her personal life than it is about the job. So which brings me nicely on to number 2. The ending is different. In the movie, obviously, the big thing is that she's super good at her job. She eclipses Emily, gets offered it. Obviously, Emily couldn't go in the end because she was on crutches, but that's beside the point. But what happens in the book is Emily gets mono, so she can't go. It's impossible. So it's kind of like she ended up in hospital, but without the accident being caused by Andy. And So Andy goes to Paris, absolutely hates it. She barely gets any sleep. She's like super stressed. Like it's the absolutely horrible experience. Whereas they do glamorize it in the movie. It does seem like she has quite a good time.
Yeah.
But then her friend Lily gets into a car accident back home.
Oh, wow.
And the Andy character decides not to go home to be by her. She's literally in a coma, possibly about to die. But then, and tells Miranda that. And Miranda basically says, okay, good job. Miranda doesn't even ask her to stay. But then when Miranda keeps being as demanding, Andy snaps and says fuck you to her in public, and then storms off and goes home, and obviously gets fired.
Yeah.
So very different. Lily's story is very different. Lily is actually more important than the boyfriend. The boyfriend's called Alex in the book, not Nate. But Lily, they've just taken the same name, so it's obviously very vaguely based on the same character. Lily is her best friend from childhood, which I think she's meant to be in the movie. There's a reference that we've known each other for 16 years. And they become roommates about halfway through the book. But basically, Lily is she's studying for a PhD, but she's a bit of a slut. Like, she sleeps around like crazy. All power to her, but it kind of gets into really toxic where she's drinking all the time. She ends up like getting completely drunk and not remembering bringing a guy home. So basically she descends into alcoholism, and the implications that part of it is because her friend is being unavailable, and it's because then she's drunk when she gets into the car accident at the end that brings Andy home. So very different, very dark story.
Very different to the put together artist, art
gallery manager, who's just a little bit judgmental. But yeah, so that's kind of the much bigger on the personal front than the relationship. The relationship is very different. So obviously Nate is a chef who lives with her, whereas Alex, the boyfriend in the book, he's a teacher in an underprivileged area. So he is actually doing the whole thing with Nate is he says, hey, I'm not exactly doing God's work. Yeah. I'm like doing, I'm making fancy food for rich people. But Alex in the novel is actually helping underprivileged children, and his job is, but he's not a prick about it. Alex in the book is an absolute saint. He's like super understanding until the end. They actually stay together until the Lily crash. But because initially she doesn't plan on coming back, when she does eventually come back after quitting, Alex basically says, like, he says it politely, but he says, I don't want to really be with someone who had to hesitate to do that. Like, to me, it was an obvious thing that you should have come home immediately. Yeah. And you know what? Fair enough. Because this is the thing. Andy in the book, she's a bitch. She is horrible. I never liked her at all. And maybe it's because I'm comparing her to Anne Hathaway, but everything's written from her point of view, but she whines constantly. She's unappreciative. She's bad at her job. I've heard this, especially in American movies and TV shows. It's very important for your main protagonist to actually be good at your job, because it's really hard to forgive stuff if someone's shit at their job. And that's why we like Andy so much in the.
It's almost like in the book, the Lily was kind of the part of the moral dilemma that they say. Is it Andy in the book? Or
it's Andy.
Andy in the book, whereas in the film, the moral dilemma is the relationship with Nate. And,
the friends are more in the background.
Yeah, the friends are definitely more secondary.
Then Miranda is completely one-dimensional. There's nothing about her personal life. There's nothing about her being nice to her at the end. Obviously, she literally quits by telling her to fuck off. So she obviously wasn't going to give her a reference. So Miranda does come across as horrible in the book, but it's a very biased point of view. Yes, and there's the scenes of her screaming. She deliberately gives her tasks. It's not the Harry Potter thing, but she like deliberately goes out of her way to inconvenience her and give her impossible stuff, or give her, like, she fucks with her basically,
trying to set her up to fail.
Exactly. Yeah. The big one, this shocked me in the first few pages. Andy is xenophobic and borderline racist.
Okay.
So xenophobic means that you're basically just looking down on anyone who's different from you. So I use that because it's not just about race, but she makes like really bitchy jokes about people in New York not speaking English.
Oh wow!
She moved in before she moves in with Lily. She lives with two Indian girls, and she literally says at one point, "I could never tell them apart."
Oh, that's awful.
It is. She makes fun of Miranda's British accent and like talks about it like it's the worst thing in the world. Obviously, that one's a bit more nuanced because it's like she's associating with her and she's horrible to her. But still, it's the trend of making fun of anyone who sounds differently. Her brother-in-law, so she's got a sister in it, who's married to someone who lives in Houston. She talks about Houston like it's a fucking third world country, and when the husband is there, she makes fun of his southern accent, like he's I mean, she calls him a hillbilly and like all that stuff. Just, I mean, yeah.
She's looking down on a lot of people.
Exactly. She's extremely...
in a position where she's probably shouldn't be doing that.
Exactly. And there's just it's mostly at the beginning, but just throughout. I guess it sets you up not to like this person. But
yeah, it's probably done intentionally. But
I know it's not, because it's her. Like, she is the character. I think this is who I do not come away with a good impression of the author, because it's meant to be her. And the fact that she's writing this, those aren't things that you would write someone saying from the first person in the book unless you believe them yourself when they're the main character. Number 7, keeping with the theme of Andy not being a great person, as I mentioned, she steals clothes from work and resells them for thousands of dollars. She overexpenses things all the time. Like, she would go to Starbucks to get, whenever she'd use the taxi, she would always overpay to pay the taxi drivers. Okay, fine, because it's all expensed. But when she would go to coffee shops, instead of just buying an $8 coffee for Miranda, she would spend $30 on coffees and then give them to homeless people. Which, nice to give to homeless people. But it is just the fact that it's not once, it's every single time. So she's consistently overexpensing her work account.
Yeah, and is she doing it to help the homeless, or is she
she's
doing it to spite?
She says she's doing it to spite them. Also, this isn't as bad, but it's just to build a character. She's a chain smoker in this, and one of the things that really bothers me, again, the book is written from her point of view, so she's doing everything to make you side with her. Like, one of the things is that she's always being sent on coffee runs, and by the time she gets back, the coffee is too cold, so she gets sent right back out on another coffee run. So there's one instance where she does this, and then on the way back, she stops for a cigarette and calls up her boyfriend. And you're like, well, this is why the coffee's cold.
This is why the coffee is cold, Andy.
Yeah. And so
there's a reference to that in the film, though, isn't there? Like, hot Starbucks.
Yes. Yeah. That is like an
That's
Easter
a
egg
good way,
to that.
I think, of capturing that, even though it wasn't Andy's fault.
So yeah, and she's just not good at her job. There are times when she just does stuff, and you think, well, why did you do it like that? I mean, the perfect example is having cigarette breaks and having phone call breaks, when clearly what you're meant to do is like it's all very timely. So and she's never. There are a couple of bits that I highlighted of like, actually, like, well, you're wrong here. Like, you're doing stuff in the wrong way, and it's actually quite annoying. And then the other thing is that she actively fantasizes about Christian, even when she has the boyfriend. Like, it's not as though she actively flirts with him, but she's very receptive of it. And obviously she's talking about what's going on in her head. And she talks about thinking about him when she's with the boyfriend, or like thinking he's super hot. Whereas I feel like with Anne Hathaway, yes, she puts up with it. She thinks it's silly, but it's not until she's single and he, breaks down her barriers. She's finding like something's going to happen to him, and it doesn't feel like she's actively interested in him.
No, and I think obviously she has. There's definitely a bit of regret on the morning after when they're in Paris, I think. But as you said, she can do what she wants.
Yeah, I don't think that one doesn't need to be read into too much.
No.
Oh yeah, and then so she never sleeps with Chris. Despite being more into him, she doesn't actually sleep with him in the book. She just has a fun night out with him at a party. I can't remember if we said this, but people ask, why they wish Anne Hathaway hadn't had to sleep with him in the movie, or hadn't slept with him. But the thing is, for the story, she needed to sleep with him to find all the papers in his apartment.
Yeah, that was part of the plot. Really.
Yeah, exactly.
If she hadn't, she would never have known.
Exactly. So good thing.
Well done, Andy.
Number 9, Nigel is a tiny side character. There's 2 gay guys who work at the publication that she sort of runs into, but they have no role in the story, and so they obviously decided to just have one and to make it more important. And then finally, the tone is just totally different. Where the movie is satirical, glamorous, morally reflective, the book is cynical, bitter, basically just a workplace revenge fantasy. So
I see the book has been around for many years, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone that I know that's even read the book, actually, or even if they have, they've not said anything about it. So I guess it's not that memorable. But the film is definitely memorable.
Yes, it did do well. Like, it was in the New York Times bestseller for ages, and they obviously maybe they bigged it up more because of the movie. But
what year did the book forget?
2003. So it was
I was very young then.
Yeah,
so
but we did Gone Girl with Sunita. It's slightly different, but the Gone Girl book is really good, and the movie is really good, even though it's different.
It's quite rare that both are good. Really,
Yes,
actually.
I think usually if both are good, it's stuff like Harry Potter or Game of Thrones,
excluding those.
But I think there's a lot of movies where they're based.
In this category specifically.
Yes, I think what they're doing. The Prestige is one I did recently, where I read the book, and it's slightly different. In that case, my metaphor was that Christopher Nolan took the Prestige book, smashed it into 100 pieces, picked up 60 of those pieces, created 40 more, and put them together completely differently, and that's how he made the movie. I see this more of they took the bare bones of the book. A character called Andy who has a boyfriend.
Yeah.
There's a Paris trip. She works for an abusive boss. And then they fleshed it out in a completely different way. She's a completely different character. Her boyfriend's completely different. The Miranda character is completely different. But they did a great job. So yeah, that's the book versus the film. Yeah, I would not. The ending is a bit tense. Like the first 200 pages, I was like, what? That's the thing. There's no plot. It's literally just her day to day doing all this stuff, and it's quite boring. And then I guess in the last 100 to 150 pages with Emily not going to Paris, and then the stuff with Lily. Obviously, it's tragic, but it does at least become interesting. It's like, oh, she actually has a drinking problem caused by you. So the last 100, 150 pages are interesting. But yeah, I know you're a huge fan of the movie, but I wouldn't say it's necessary to read, or it doesn't really add anything to read.
Yeah.
I think you'll get 90% of what you would get out of reading it from what I've just told you.
Thanks.
All right, let's move on to the actors and characters. So we're going to go from least likable, important to most likable and important.
Okay.
So that's why we'll start with Lily in my book.
Okay. Yeah. You really don't like Lily?
I really don't. I went literally just in my final prep. I went through it. She's only in 2 scenes before the art gallery where she has no redeeming qualities. She just makes one joke about the job. Then the Marc Jacobs bag thing where she participates in taking the phone. And then she's just, as I say, toxically judgmental about the Christian kiss.
Yeah, she's a bit judgmental, but it's kind of a bit forgettable, I think, in the film. For
Yeah.
me.
I think the reason I'm
to-
focusing on it is just because I think, having done this analysis, that based on what we see, I find her more problematic than Nate. Partly because Nate is slightly more fleshed out. Because it's not a case of, I can't even see what her Lily's side of the story is, because other than obviously we know her friend hasn't been through that, but like we've all been through that. You're supposed to have a group of friends, and obviously if one of your friends is suddenly less involved in your life, that's sad. But it shouldn't be, especially in your 20s when your careers are taking off, it shouldn't be breaking your world if one of your friends is suddenly a bit more busy at work. And we still see them hanging out, so it's not like they don't see her at all. But yeah, then I like Doug, though. Obviously, he's the other guy.
Yeah, he seems quite nice.
He's still part of the phone thing, which is the only bad thing about him. But he's actually the only one out of the 3 of them who actually seems interesting, and he admires her work. Like, he knows about the shows and the fashion.
Yeah, he seems to know a lot about Andy's world. I think that's just used in that moment to show that how little Andy knows of the fashion world in that moment. But yeah, he's also not in it a lot. But
yeah, I think he's in the same as Lily, but I
Yeah.
like him. I never saw this until recently. Is he meant to be gay, do you think? Or is it just ambiguous?
It's too ambiguous. I think he's not in it enough to really clarify. I think it's quite also not relevant in the film because he's not one of the core characters. So I quite like that.
Yes.
It's just quite is there, and you don't really have to think about what his character is. But I mean, a lot of people that are straight know about.
But I think that's
quite common. It's like pop culture, isn't it? So.
Because there was even a joke at the beginning when he knows all that stuff and he says, "Oh, because I'm a girl," and then someone says, "Oh, that explains it." And that's where I guess what I'm curious is he a gay man, and so it's not surprising that he would, I'm not saying all do, but he would know that, or is the fact that he is a straight man who happens to know a lot about fashion, because those are two like different.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's not important enough for it to know. So let's talk about Nate.
Okay. Right.
So. I'll try and make my case, but then I really want to go. This isn't the case of I'm trying to convince you to side with me or anything. I truly want to go back and forth on it. But here's my view. So he's been portrayed as the toxic boyfriend. First of all, I don't think he's written that way. I don't think when they made the movie he was supposed to be seen as this toxic guy. I think he was meant to be, as you said earlier, he was meant to reflect her personal life and the person she used to be. And just kind of how that hit as things deteriorate with him, it's about her changing and the relationship deteriorating. But what I think has happened is the movie came out in 2006, and then in the 2010s, it coincides with fourth wave feminism, and then a lot of things going online. And I think he became an easy target for one of the big things with fourth wave feminism is analyzing women's role in the workplace and about how certain conceptions that were maybe outdated before now being better. And so here the idea that he's not supportive of her is being used as the fact that, oh, he's undermining her, he doesn't respect her career choices, all of these things. And there's definitely some problematic things without him. But I find that the word toxic gets thrown around too much these days in a lot of contexts. And I think this is a good example. So I basically feel as though maybe he was written to almost be a sympathetic character, which I don't think you should be overly sympathetic for him either. He's just kind of there along for the ride, and let's just say a victim of her success, but that's not a bad thing. There should be no ill will towards her for basically growing out of the relationship. But then it swung too far of saying he's the villain of the movie, he's the worst person in the movie, he's holding her back, yada yada yada. I think part of the problem is that Adrian Grenier is not particularly a good actor. I think he's easily the worst actor in it.
Yeah, I do agree with that. That's something I do agree with. It's not, the lines that he delivers are not necessarily that like emotional, even though like he is supposed to be, you know, the oh my god, Andy, you have changed so much. Our relationship is failing. We're not spending any time together. But it's kind of just a bit. Meh.
Yeah, and I think he's not great, and I do think his lines are some of the worst ones. The whole thing about, I think one of the things, and I guarantee you, even though they wouldn't name it, it's one of the things at the core of the toxic thing is when he says I'd rather you be a pole dancer with some integrity. It's a really weird
point. I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like that, and so I think it's a badly written line. It's badly delivered, and I think that kind of leads to the backlash.
I think that's kind of one of the points that it's one of the point building towards him being seen as the villain of the film.
Yeah. But ultimately, I think it's simple. They're in their early 20s. They probably were college sweethearts. In the book, they've been together for all of college. They're young. They have like a puppy love, and they're both trying to find their way. And they just grew apart. Like, that's the thing. You don't have to make this a whole thing about him being a toxic man that was undermining her and, you know, gaslighting her or whatever. He fell in love with this person. She loved him. They were two people. She took a job which radically transformed her. There's no ambiguity about that. And that person wasn't the person that he fell in love with, and it's not someone that he wanted to stay in love with. And so they grew apart. And that's it. I think it's funny because he's probably the character because I'm spending a lot of time with him. But I think people overthink it. Like, I think it's actually a really basic, simple story arc that's been blown out of proportion as being too negative, but it's actually like really simple. He's just meant to be someone that, they grew apart.
This film definitely gets a lot of, which villain is the real villain? And there isn't really that much. Obviously, there's some characters which you don't agree with what they say, but they're there intentionally to
they're serving a purpose.
pull the storyline. As you said in the book, Alex was very nice and supportive up until the point where Andy did something wrong, whereas in the film, if everything was nice at home, Andy would have no issue with working at Runway, and then there's not really any premise for the film. So I think it's kind of some of the storyline and the dilemma that Andy is in is at Nate's expense of him being a bit moany. He comes across quite moany, really, I think, and that's to say the lines that he delivers are quite negative, and it comes across not supportive and gives Andy this dilemma of like, why can't you be a bit more understanding? Whereas at the same time, he's working at a chef, which is a job that we know has long hours and sociable hours and so on. But you don't really get that character development of Nate. So yes, he does come across a bit of a villain because he is kind of standing in Andy's way, but there isn't enough of the lines or the delivery. But if this film was to be remade now exactly how it is, I think his lines would be different.
I would change a few things, but I think you're talking about what he could do, but this is, I think, the rock and a hard place situation is if he said nothing, if he just put up with it, no one would respect him because he'd just be a doormat. Because if your partner you never saw them anymore and they forgot your birthday and everything, those things aren't okay. I'm not saying you should break up with them immediately, but those are things that you should. So if he didn't say anything, we're just like, oh, okay, that's not good. If he just left, if he said nothing and then he was like, fuck this, I'm breaking up with you, I think that would be the most toxic, because you're not giving it a chance, you're not at all being understanding. And then what he says is he says something, but he's not particularly happy about it, and he maybe doesn't do it in the most tactful way. He's being seen as controlling. But an interesting detail is that in the writers and stuff have said that what they did when they wrote him is he basically is the role that when there's a man in the main character, he takes the role of the wife or girlfriend that's always kind of commenting on as they change and they go down a dark path. So it's funny that they've given him a role that's usually occupied by a woman, and a lot of women have said that role is toxic. Now, Whether that means that there's a double standard or it means that female characters, usually written by men, have a toxic role in movies is definitely up for debate. But I did find that quite funny. It's a bit ironic.
Yeah.
That he's put in that role. Now, I mentioned before that there was a key shot which to me changed things. When I think it's the first time when she gets the job, and she's talking about how, no, I think maybe Doug's the one who said 1 million girls would kill for that job.
Yes.
And I only noticed this literally today. Andy says, "Well, I'm not one of those girls." And there's a shot without a word of Nate looking at her with a smile. So if you were to recut those scenes into Nate's story, you would start from that point and then you would gradually show her becoming one of those girls. And that's his problem, is he thinks she's becoming one of the runway girls. He says that when they break up. The problem is, and this I think is the key of their breakup, maybe if she did this for 10, 15 years, she would become like Emily or like Miranda. But the fact is, even at the end, at no point does she say, "Oh, I'm going to stay there for an extra year. No, I'm going to become an editor at this." For me, even though she loses a bit of herself, it's always clearly a means to an end. Mm-hmm. She's doing this, as we talked about, for that shortcut, because she wants to jump ahead, because she wants to be successful. And I think that's the thing that Nate doesn't understand. And maybe you could say she doesn't explain it properly. But rather than seeing it as, I understand that this is taking a lot of your time, but this is costing you a lot just to get this shortcut. He says, "You're becoming one of them." And she says, "No, I'm not." And so I think that's the disconnect. And so ultimately, I think Nate's biggest thing isn't that he's toxic and controlling, but is that he doesn't understand what's happening to her. And he's scared about the fact that she's turning into someone different. And that's not the person that he loved. And so the relationship needed to end, and that's what happened. So, yeah.
Cool.
Giselle Bundchen is in this. Apparently, she was approached to be in it. She's one of the only people from the industry that agreed to be in it. But her condition is, she said she didn't want to be a model, so she's an assistant and friends with Emily. But I think she got like 2 lines, but I think they're good lines. She looked good.
It's the Chanel boot scene. It's iconic. There are a couple of others. I've got noted too. Heidi Klum. She's in like one of the fashion after parties. I think she maybe appears as herself, but she's just kind of in the background. And then Valentino himself has also been interviewed at the same time. So there's a little montage. But to go back to your point, a lot of people from the industry didn't want to be in it. But I wonder for the new version that's coming out.
Yeah, I think a lot more people will be in it.
Yeah, I'm hoping so, because otherwise, I think we kind of needed. That was what was missing from the first film, but you can understand why. But hopefully this time around, where the film is so iconic, so many of us have watched it. It's had 20 years to mature,
and it's been approved by Anna Wintour. So
there should be more designer, but at the same time, you still want it to be entertaining.
Yes. Because
there's so many documentaries about the fashion industry out there, and they're quite interesting, and they really give you a good look into it, but they're not necessarily funny.
Yeah. I was going to do this later, but let's just do it now because we don't spend too long. What are your thoughts on the new one?
I feel like I've seen too much of it already through social media. It's one of those where obviously they're filming it in New York, and one of the most important parts of it is the outfits. Yeah. And there's just too much of it on social media already with the paparazzi. But the thing is, obviously, once you look at it once on Instagram, then it shows you like again and again and again. So I feel like I've seen too many outfits.
You've seen the trailer?
I have seen the trailer. Not too sure about the red shoes. I think they are not. They could have chosen a more current style than the Valentino stud. But obviously, it's a nod to the previous film, so I kind of get it. As I said, the first film had fashion in it, but it was kind of done quite intentionally to be quite over the top sometimes. So I think hopefully we get a bit more of that in in the second film. But yeah, I think I'm looking forward to it. But sometimes you can get let down by the number 2 that comes out, or yeah. But I hope it's good.
Yeah, I'm worried. Generally the concept, I'm worried because this was such a unique flash in the pan combination of, as we were talking about, so many things that worked. The trailer worries me on different levels. The whole Miranda not remembering her, I feel like every trailer I've seen is based around that, and it's shown 2 different times. So I really hope it's not one of those where she just spends half the movie pretending she doesn't know who she is, and then it see later on she's like, oh, of course I know who you are, blah blah blah. I hope it's a one-time gag and that's it. But I'm also worried on the production value, because I feel like they're traveling the world, they're being given, I'm sure the budget is probably over $100 million, so they're being a lot more money to work with, and sometimes I don't think that's a good thing. I actually forgot to say this, but something like the Nate cupcake scene, apparently that was originally meant to be a shot, a scene at a gig, and they were going to have a big fight and everything, but then they just ran out of money, so they did that. But I think that scene works so much better because it's so simple and grounded and realistic, of just like the cupcake, the two of you just sort of moaning at each other. And I'm worried that by giving them too much budget, they're going to overdo everything and it'll become style over substance. And
there's a risk of that for sure.
So I hope it's good. I'm going to go in, but I'm worried.
I'm being optimistic, but there is definitely a risk of it being overstyled, too much a bigger budget, and it's kind of all been thrown everything's been thrown at it, and also as well, like the story was at the end of the first one was the perfect ending. Andy had gotten into the career that she wanted, but now she's apparently working for Miranda again, apparently. A spoiler alert. And is she with Nate? Will we know?
I don't think Nate's going to be in it.
I hope not.
I'm sure there'll be a throwaway line about that. But the other thing I'm worried about, the thing I'm worried about is whether all four of them are going to just be caricatures of themselves, because
like nothing changes,
or every other thing is just a wink wink. Remember when Nigel said this in the first one, or just more of the same? Because the only way sequels work, and both as a film and the characters, is there needs to be a good story for the sequel to work, and then each one of them needs to have a really good story arc, which is not an easy thing to do. It needs to be the story needs to be well thought out. It needs to be well written. Like I said, the reason this movie works so well is because they nail every level of the pyramid. And they need to do that again, because even if they miss one step in the new one, it's going to be a disappointment. That's the hard thing about doing a sequel to a great movie, is that the bar is so much higher.
Also, as well, the way that we interpret fashion now is a lot of it's through social media. Yeah. So obviously, we've referenced quite a lot of the kind of job elements of that you see in the first film. Like that's going to be quite different, I think, in the second one, where there's probably going to be references to social media and the sort of influencers potentially, and that might be a bit of a turn off.
Also, she won't be an assistant; she'll be a writer, so it's not as though she'll be able to like be horrible to her.
Yeah,
I don't know. Well, we'll have to talk soon after.
Yeah, the only way is to wait and find out.
Yep. Okay, back to the characters. So let's talk about we're about in the middle of the characters. Let's talk about the center of the movie, Andrea. So she's what I like to call a linchpin character. So I've found this in a lot of movies that have a big cast. So think Luke Skywalker or Neo in the Matrix or Harry Potter. When they're important characters, we're seeing pretty much the world through their lens, but they're a little bit bland, but you need them to be that way so that the characters around them can shine. So, you need Luke Skywalker to not take too much of the spotlight so that Darth Vader and Han Solo can shine. Same with Neo for Morpheus and Trinity to shine. And so I think this is a perfect example that I think Andy's great, but you need her to not be the center of she's the center of the attention, but she can't be taking the spotlight because you need the spotlight to be on Miranda most of the time.
I think that's probably the only comparison you can make from The Devil Wears Prada to Star Wars.
Yeah, well, I made it.
You found it.
And well, ironically, there again, Darth Vader starts off seeing like a one-dimensional villain, but it turns out he's a lot more complex. But yeah, so at the start, she's deliberately plain and observational, doesn't know about fashion, awkward, reacts to the world. But then, as we've talked about, it's just really nice to see. And that's the thing, unlike the book, she's never mean-spirited. She's a nice person. She's a bit naive. Like I do think there's something fun about watching someone who's smart, but who thinks that they're smarter or more competent than they are. And it turns out that, because I think being an assistant, it's a very particular type of hard. It's not like you need to be a brain surgeon or like a lawyer level of intellect or whatever, but you just need to have like common sense and organizational skills and street smarts and but you can't, those things are basically impossible. You can't learn them in a book. You just need to do them. And she does it and she gets good at it. And I think it's really nice. The arc is broken down to she's an outsider, she adapts to it, and then she has the moral realization that things are wrong, and then she exits, which is kind of a perfect arc for getting in, getting the most out of something, and getting out. Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say about her is I think a couple of times I said what should she have done, blah blah. So what would you say off the top of your head? What would you say her biggest mistake was? See, I agree with your silence. I don't think there is one.
Yeah, I don't think that there's nothing major that she does that's bad. Obviously, we're all human at the end of the day. She was trying her best. I think there's nothing I would have done differently.
No.
I think it was all a learning curve. It's that age where you grow as a person and you make mistakes and you learn from them and you kind of develop. You're forming your career at this point. And she's going into it with that naivety of not really knowing what she's fully getting herself into, but she's fully committed at the same time.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, well, kind of eventually. When she gets, into it. But yeah, I don't think there's anything I would have done differently.
Yeah, well, I was thinking, yeah, so I agree. I don't think anything she's done was obviously wrong until the end. I think if she had stayed past the ending, I'm not saying that would make her a bad person, but it would make her a particular type of person that she claimed not to be. It would kind of, this is the thing, the key. If she had stayed, she would have proved Nate right, that she had become one of them. And by leaving, she proved Nate wrong, that no, I am still myself. I just kind of lost myself for a little bit.
Yeah, she stayed true to what she wanted in the beginning, but if she had stayed, I mean, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah,
and people change on what they want in life, and I think if she did stay, I would have also respected that.
Yeah. So I've written here, the film shows how perfectly reasonable decisions can gradually lead you somewhere you never intended to go.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So we talked about Andy. Anne Hathaway, how do you find her in that role? I think she's kind of perfect to being, as I say, that kind of bland center.
I agree with that. She has similar roles, I think, in other films. That she's important, but not necessarily part of all of the drama. I think One Day is another film. I think she's kind of like that.
Which one's that?
No,
the one with the guy. Yeah.
So I won't go into that because it's quite easy to spoil the storyline.
No,
if you've not seen it.
I've seen this. We watched the show and then I watched the movie.
I
didn't
enjoyed
know the ending when I watched the show. It broke me at the end. Oh.
So yeah, no spoilers. But I think she plays that kind of character really well.
Agreed.
But yeah, I think seeing Rachel McAdams in that would have maybe been better.
I mean,
but
Rachel McAdams is amazing as an actress. Like the fact that she did Mean Girls and
she would have been a good Emily, really.
She'd been a great Emily. I mean, I think she could have done. So she did. I put her in my top 25 actresses of the 21st century, basically because of The Notebook and Mean Girls, which came out the same year. So to me, that
she was working full time.
Yeah, but that just shows her range. Like she would have been much more of a Notebook character here than a Ridge. But basically, she could have harnessed the Notebook type of character to be Andy, or she could have harnessed Regina George to be Emily.
Yeah.
So yeah, she would have. I mean, I'm sure she would have been great, but I'm glad that Anne Hathaway got to do this because I mean, it's hard to imagine anyone else now.
Yeah, at this stage in the game, it's really hard to imagine.
Okay, more fun. Emily, why is Emily great?
Emily is great. How long have you got? I think she's my favorite character in the film. I would go as far as saying that because she just has these one-liners. You just always know that she's going to be okay because she's got a comeback for you. It's kind of bitchy, but it's also there's those moments where she's quite nice towards Andy, and she's just a fun person to be around. And I think the fact that she's British as well kind of really adds to it in the film because she's the main British person she's the only British person in the film, I think.
Yeah,
I think so.
Because in the book, Miranda is British.
Yeah,
Anna Wintour is. But obviously,
yeah.
Meryl Streep doesn't do a British accent. She just uses a fancy American accent.
Yeah,
so,
which I think makes sense.
And Emily is definitely not British in the book because Andy's always complaining about the British accent on Miranda. But I did write down, do you think if Emily was not British, do you think she would still... I think being British makes her a lot more likable because it kind of takes some of the venom out of the bitchiness.
Yeah, I think so. It's just the kind of quick way of speaking is the way that makes it so funny. And she's definitely my favorite character just purely because of the one-liners. The level of sass is...
I also wrote down, obviously Meryl Streep is the queen of it, the face acting, but Emily actually does a lot of it too. Like eye rolls and the
Yeah.
like the wiggling of the mouth. And there's a lot of shots of, I mean, again, there's a lot of shots of everyone I said of just the face, but she does a lot of them as well. I do have one negative note. I think her makeup is terrible for a lot of
Yes.
it.
Do you know what? There was a whole Reddit that I seen.
Really?
about this, and I wasn't expecting to see it, but then when I started seeing it, I was like, oh yeah, they really went really harsh on the eyeshadow
Yes,
with
with
Emily,
different
and I think
colours.
it's even worse when she's ill.
Yes.
And even in the background, when she's in the background, like shaking her head, all you can see is like two sets of eyeshadow moving. And also, I don't really love the fashion that they put her in.
Yeah,
every outfit that she's in is in a belt, and it's
well, it's because they're
it's
trying to show how skinny she is.
Yeah, it's kind of just a lot going on with her
Yes.
look, but it's kind of I think the fact it just adds to the way that she delivers some of these really great lines that I do reference still today. I think one of my favorites is when Andy's talking about her dad coming for the weekend, and she goes, and he says to Emily, "Are you doing anything fun this weekend?" And she just goes, "Yes." But it's just the face and the delivery. I think it's just perfect.
I'm getting a lot of this, and I want a bit of this.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like she's a bitch, but you kind of like it.
Yeah, she's kind of she's a mini Miranda. But and as I said before, I think you forgive a lot because you do, and especially having read the book, like when they go so much about the sleep deprivation and then the dieting and and the stress, you do feel for her. And it's the fact that she is the competent one at the beginning. Emily Blunt's casting as Emily, funny coincidence. Do you know the story about that one?
No, I don't.
So she was a complete unknown. She was on the lot auditioning for a completely different role, and I think some casting director who someone saw her in a parking lot is the whole legend thing that she got recruited from a parking lot. But then I think she'd flown back to the UK, and then but her tape, maybe the person who'd seen her found her tape audition, got her to audition again, and she finally got it. But then the Anne Hathaway one, apparently she worked really, not only did they want Rachel McAdams, Anne Hathaway basically knew about the project early on and was like really very much lobbying to be in it. Apparently at one point she came to a meeting and they had one of those Chinese pebble gardens, and she wrote "hire me" into it. So she was a massive key. What I like is when someone's approach to getting a movie matches what the character would have done. And I think being a keynote is kind of what Andy would have done. One thing about the Rachel McAdams detail, I think saying, oh, she rejected it 3 times sounds a bit simplistic, but given that the script was reworked over and over and it started in a very different place, the Zoolander thing, I can definitely see that maybe if Rachel McAdams saw an early version and was like, no, I don't want to do this movie.
Well, yeah, maybe she saw it when it was in, maybe she'd read a bit of the book and thought, I don't want to be a part of that either.
There's definitely, I'll say more when we do on the script, when we get to I'll talk more about the versions of the script. And once you understand that, there's definitely previous versions of this. It seemed like this could have gone very wrong on a script level. And if you'd seen a slightly different version, you could have thought, no, I don't want to be part of that. Then, the emotional heart of the movie, our boy Nigel.
Oh, Nigel. There's nothing unlikable about Nigel throughout the whole thing.
It's perfect.
I think obviously there's a lot of... something that's quite consistent throughout the film is comments around body image. And he is not exempt from that. He has quite a lot there's quite a lot of lines that he says that reference those sorts of things, which isn't great. But he's quite a likable character. I think you do get to see a glimpse of who he is, who he really opens up to Andy when Andy is moaning to him about why Miranda doesn't like her. And
that gets me emotional too.
He's like, get real, like, we work hard in this industry. You don't know what sacrifices we've made. It's kind of get on with it.
He's he both represents the people who work there in a non-toxic way, but he also in that speech represents the readers. He's like, this magazine is really important for a lot of people around the world, including myself.
And he gives Andy the makeover.
Yeah, he does.
He does a great job.
Yeah.
There's nothing unlikable really about Nigel in this.
But he's not
in it just the right amount as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think 1 or 2 more scenes could be too much. And he's another one I'm worried because he's definitely in the sequel. I'm worried that they might overdo him or whatever.
He's probably I imagine he's now got the promotion, surely.
Well, he still seems to be working for Miranda, so I don't know what that means, because he doesn't seem like he could get much higher in Runway. The whole point was that he was going to become head of another company.
Yeah, let's see.
Do you know who was considered? Who one of the few people that it's been confirmed was considered for him, his role?
No, I don't know any.
Graham Norton.
stop.
Yeah, I mean, he's not really. Because did he start off as an actor before he had the show?
Do you know, when I was thinking of my modern recasting, I immediately thought of Graham Norton. It's just the mannerisms, I think, of them,
he's,
but actually
he's
don't
too
think
old now. But I can
Yeah.
definitely see, if assuming he's a good actor, which I don't know, I can definitely see Graham Norton in that. But maybe too many British people. Some of the things that the director said that Nigel needed was to be credible from the fashion authority, sharp humor, and emotional depth. And I think tick, tick, tick.
Yeah.
This made me think about the best straight men playing gay characters, which is something that unfortunately was done a bit too much back then. And it does seem
sure.
like nowadays there's so many out gay actors that they try and give those roles to actual gay actors. But so here are some quite old movies that came up. Is obviously Brokeback Mountain is the most famous one.
Yeah, of course.
Then have you seen Philadelphia with Tom Hanks and Antonio Banderas?
No, I haven't, but I've heard of
It's
it.
really good. So Tom Hanks is a lawyer who gets AIDS in a gay relationship,
Yep.
and basically gets fired for having AIDS,
Right.
and then takes his company to court. And Antonio Banderas is his partner in it, and Denzel Washington is a lawyer. It's homophobic. He was very, very much by today's standards, he was a raging homophobe, but by then standards, he was just a normal black guy who was like, not outwardly homophobic, but definitely had a lot of prejudice and stuff. But it's mostly about Tom Hanks and Denzel's relationship as lawyer and client while going through the courtroom thing.
Right.
But Tom Hanks is perfectly fine, but but the character he plays him pretty normal. But Antonio Banderas is a bit more flamboyant, and because he's obviously the love of his life is dying of AIDS, and he's going through all this, so he's really good in that.
I think those stories are important to say. That was a very hard time
Yes.
for people of the queer community, and I think those stories being told, yes, it's been told by a straight person, but having those stories told all together, I think maybe it can be considered as a kind of gateway into
definitely.
things, because as said, those stories really matter, and it's, at the end of the day, film is meant to represent real life in certain circumstances. So yeah, it's great to see those characters and those stories, for sure.
You should definitely check it out. Another one was Sean Penn as Harvey Milk.
Oh, I love that film.
Yeah.
I had that on DVD. That was a long time ago, by the way, and I've watched that many a time. It's a really, really good story.
Yeah, I only watched it once, but it was very good. And then the last one I have, I don't know if you heard of this one, is a movie called A Single Man, starring
Yes.
Colin Firth,
Have seen that as well.
directed by Tom Ford.
Yeah. Yes, it's a very arty film,
Yes.
actually. Very sad.
Yeah. Okay, ending with the best character, I think unequivocally, Miranda Priestly,
Gosh,
Meryl
yes.
Streep.
We
Would you
haven't
like
talked
to?
about enough already, have we?
I actually feel like we've talked around her, but let's really focus on her for a little while.
I think starting with the way that she enters the film, it's just so crisp and clean. She's not said anything yet, but people around her are already panicking.
Yeah.
And it's like it switches from 1 minute of all of her team around her flinging rails, getting everything ready for the day, being ready to serve the owner of Runway, and then the scenes to her just being simple. She talks very calmly.
Yeah.
You just immediately know the character, her leadership style, and what's gonna, where this is gonna go, already from the very beginning. And as I said, the way that Meryl Streep delivers that is just perfect. I can't really imagine many of the people doing that role.
I think when we were doing the recasting, there's a lot of people I could imagine doing the role, but no one doing it to the caliber.
I think if you have to do a recasting, you'd have to forget that there was a first version.
Yeah, it's like you read this,
because you can't really. Yeah, I don't think it could be. You just watch it comparing it to Meryl Streep at that point.
Yeah,
so,
or you'd have to do something slightly. So like you mentioned something about the quietness. The story there that she said in interviews is that she was harnessing Clint Eastwood. That she'd noticed him both as an actor and a director, that he never screamed, he never got, but he was respected. Like he ran his sets like an iron fist, and he would just always speak quietly. And so she says she credits him as her inspiration for that.
it is a good quality leadership style.
And
you want to if you would want your manager, so on, in that workplace situation, to be calm, and this is what we're going to do. You're steering the ship at the end of the day. You can't be frantic, but the way that she goes about it and the things that she asks her team to do and there's definitely some elements where she treats her assistants in quite a degrading
Yes,
manner.
yeah.
And that's not okay, but it's done for humorous effect in a way. Like there's like that compilation of her throwing her coat and bag on the desk, which is obviously, if that would happen to me at work, I probably would leave. I wouldn't be able to do that, but it's done to kind of show that hierarchy, the comedic effect, the time passing by, and it's quite clever how they do it.
Yeah, again, maybe I've gone too far in the sympathy department with her, but I feel like stuff like that, I could spend 10 minutes, we won't, talking just about the codes, because
you could
I could, but because on the one hand, it's always, to me, it's about whether she's doing stuff consciously or subconsciously, because is she just subconsciously treating them like shit because she sees them like shit? Or is it a power move? Like, you are the junior assistant, hence I will always toss my coat. Because it's a pivotal moment when she basically tells her that she's coming to Paris and she chucks the jacket onto Emily's desk.
Yes, that's what I mean. It's a power move.
Yeah,
I think
it's
so. Always, everything is a
I think
power move.
everything's calculated. I don't think she does anything by accident. Every look, every coat throw.
It's a test.
Yes. So that's...
but it's a way of her being... She's a perfectionist.
Yes.
She likes control. She is not letting anyone going to come for her, in effect, to say she needs to protect her world, and that's just how she chooses to do it. You may not agree with it, and there's probably a lot of people that wouldn't agree with it or act like that in the real world, but obviously it's dramatized. It's entertaining nonetheless, and it's unforgettable.
Yeah, and we've talked about the way she's doing it. The acting is, I've written down, she does so much with so little. Every line is just perfect. Every expression is measured. Every movement is on purpose. And apparently Meryl Streep went method for this, where not like she stayed in character all the time as a bitch, but the big thing is that she didn't hang out with the cast. She didn't become friendly with people because she just thought it would be better to keep that distance. You mentioned this is actually a real interesting thing Meryl Streep said in the oral history, is that she gives a lot of credit to the rest of the cast because Miranda only works through the gaze of others. Like the gaze, not G-A-Z.
The G-A-Z.
Yeah, the G-A-Zs of others. Because if she acted the way she did, but people didn't act all frantic around her, it would look a bit weird. It's like it's a team thing that everyone has to act like she's God, and then she needs to act like a god.
It's just the way they make her look so unapproachable.
Yes.
Which is kind of how you imagine Anna Wintour to be.
And this is where, obviously, credit to the actors, credit to Meryl Streep, but this is where the director, because everyone knows the word director, but a lot of people maybe don't really understand what a director is actually doing. But a director is saying, guys, you need to imagine that, Jesus Christ with lasers is about to come out of this elevator, and you need to change your shoes, otherwise you're going to get fired. They spend time, they're telling people, this is how you need to be thinking right now. And obviously the director nailed it about getting everyone to behave just right around her, to get the best out of her and make her performance make sense. Because even though it's funny and comic, at no point do you go, well, this is like ridiculous. This would never happen. It would absolutely.
Yeah, you know that it's going to happen.
Yeah,
it's not. It's on the right side of ridiculous.
And honestly, this wasn't true back then, and I don't want to make this about politics. If you it's the Trump thing. When you see the way, and in public, the people behave. He's got these meetings where he gets all of his secretaries together. Yeah, he gets the Secretary of State, Secretary of Interior, Secretary of Education. He gets them around a table and he gets them to all one at a time just talk about how amazing he is. And they just say, "Oh, Mr. President, you're the greatest president, blah, 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 blah." Like, you'd watch that in a movie and say, this would never happen in real life. But the fact is, he has built an environment where these people know that to stay into their job, you have to behave in a certain way and kiss my ass. And in a different way. That's obviously what's happened here with Miranda Priestly. Everyone knows that you need to have high heels when she's coming in. The magazine's going to be a particular way. You don't look at her in the eye. You don't ask questions.
There's other documentaries. There's the one about American Apparel. Have you ever watched that one? Yeah, it's a part of that car crash series, I think it's called. On Netflix, where the CEO of the company was absolutely horrible person, had all these really unrealistic, stupid demands. Yeah, there's no comparison to Miranda in that respect, but we are exposed to stories where you hear about really wild kind of CEO problems, and I think this film does it in a comedic way that doesn't make you feel like gross about it. Because she's quite degrading and she really pushes them to the test, but at the same time she has got that nurturing quality, and she gives Andrea what she wants at the end of the day.
Yes, so that's very important.
It has given the opportunity, so you may not like the style, and yes, it's not how we would normally I don't know how normal people behave, and it's not a normal workplace environment, but it is.
But it's
worked for her.
And yeah, exactly. I was gonna say that was exactly my point. If Runway, forget being a fashion magazine, like if Runway wasn't seen as Vogue, which is considered the go-to fashion magazine, if it wasn't for the fact that she was in one of the most glamorous, most successful, most cutthroat industries in the world, I think it would be unforgivable. But it's the fact that what she does is so hard, so difficult, and she's so successful at it, that I think that's why we give her so much leeway on the bad behavior. Again, that's the thing in the book. At no point does it say, yeah, she's horrible, but, you know, she brings in $500 million in, I'm making these numbers up, in ads from this. She's like runs this like thing that no one else could do, and this is where I think it's very important in the movie to have these couple of scenes that show her doing her thing. And it's like, no, she's an absolute boss, and yes, she doesn't have to behave in this toxic way to be that way, but that's her approach. And basically, you know, accept it or quit, which is eventually what happens. But I do like it, and I think I'd almost forgotten it maybe a few years ago when I rewatched it, the fact that the ending is very sweet. And maybe this is a very Hollywood, obviously it's very different in the book, it's the complete opposite. Maybe it's a very Hollywood ending, but it's a movie, and you get to give it a Hollywood ending. And I think when you say that it's a good feel good movie that you can watch lighthearted, I think the ending is key, because if the ending wasn't the way it was, like if they just went their separate ways and she just got the job based on the CV, it's kind of a bit of a, I feel like if that was going to be the ending, the movie should just end in Paris with her throwing the phone. Yeah. But by having that epilogue, you get to say, oh, actually, she respected, because ultimately she said to her, you have a choice to make. You can stay here and become like me, or you can fuck off. And she decided to fuck off. And she's basically saying, good for you. You made a decision. I reward that. You were good at your job, because she was.
Yeah, it turns out nice for her.
Exactly. She's not vindictive, which I think is nice.
Yeah, she didn't, she respected Andy's choice in the end, without really saying much.
Yes,
But yeah, it's a nice ending. That is what makes it the film that's feel good at the end. You get a happy ending, but it's not too much of a happy ending in the way that, and you see the elevated Andy afterwards. That's kind of like ready for the next step, and it's nice to see.
Ultimately, Andy got everything. She didn't get it in the way she wanted it, but ultimately she grew as a person. She became hyper competent. She got the job. She got the reference. So
Miranda did everything she
exactly.
Andy wanted effectively.
Here's a question: why? So when she walks in on the argument, that's obviously by accident.
Yes, in the townhouse.
Yes, but later on in Paris, there's no part of her that's embarrassed. Well, not she walks in on her crying because of the divorce, basically. But there's no. She lets her in. She might even have called her. It's not clear that she called her, but the point is, there's no effort by Miranda to stop her coming in, to hide, and there's no implication that she's surprised to see her. Why? And I don't have an answer. I'm curious. Why do you think she lets her see that vulnerable side of her?
I think because at this point, I think Miranda trusts Andy, because she's invited to Paris. Think about how many months of time has passed on, that actually Andy probably knows so much about Miranda at this point, because she's probably booking her kids' dentist appointments and all these sorts of things.
Doing the homework.
Doing the homework. So she's very much part of the family, I think.
And one of my thoughts is that maybe because she saw the earlier incident, Miranda's rationale, because she's obviously a hyper rational person, is she knows that things aren't great, so I might as well let her all the way in if I'm going to let her in.
But what I do enjoy about that scene is that it's even though Miranda is upset, she's just about to go to divorce. She's got no makeup on, she's crying, and she still says, by all means, move at a glacial pace. She's still got it there. That'll never go away, no matter what state she's in. And that just makes it funny. It's just good opposition of each other.
And also there is the interesting thing where Andy says, oh, I can cancel your stuff. And she's like, no, because Andy correctly said, this is what a normal person would do. This is what I would do. But Miranda's like, no, that's not how I function. So again, it's a preview of like, well, if you're going to become like me, this is going to be your life. One fun detail is that Meryl Streep made the decision on the white hair. She's like, I think this is how we should do it. The producers did not like the idea, but she was Meryl Streep. So I don't know if she actually had her real hair done that way, or if it was a wig. It probably was her real hair, that they would just do it for the whole shoot. Right?
I don't know.
But she basically,
so hard to tell these days.
She turned up, again, I don't know if it was a wig. So She just turned up at a meeting with the hair that way. Basically said, "This is how I'm doing it," and they were like, "Okay, well, Meryl Streep says so, and plus she looks great."
Well, they really wanted her to do it. So.
Yes, on one of the other podcasts I listened to, that usually I'll be like, "Oh, so here are all the other people that were considered for this role." No one. It was just her. And yeah, this movie doesn't work. I'm not saying the movie couldn't have been decent with someone really good in that role, but she elevates this movie from a good movie to a fantastic, great movie.
Yeah,
I
agreed.
Genuinely think this is one of the all-time best performances. At some point, I'll do a video on that. But so I tried to find lists of what are considered the best performances of all time. A lot of the lists are the 21st century. So just to keep it simple, we'll stick to the 21st century. I found two separate lists, completely unrelated, that both had her at number 22 for the all-time greatest performances. I went through all the things that were ahead of her. I disagree with a lot of them. They're all great. They got people like Leo as Jordan Belfort, Denzel in Training Day, Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men. But I think those are all fantastic performances. But I think Miranda Priestly has a lot more depth than a lot of those characters.
Okay.
So I went through the list. I'm actually saying that I think Miranda Priestly, Meryl Streep, is the third best, just to take everything away, the third best performance by an actor of the 21st century. The only two I have above, and it is a coincidence that both of them are on posters behind us, is Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Basterds, so the Nazi guy, and Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, he is good in Inglourious Basterds, actually. That is...
So those are the only two that I could look at it and be, no, these, to me, those are definitely better. I mean, this is obviously subjective. Those two are two of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. But this movie is nowhere near the top of my list, of the top 100. But I do think if we're looking purely just at the performance in a vacuum, I think it's the third best performance.
Would you say then it's Meryl Streep's best performance?
I think so. I've only seen Sophie's Choice once, and I think that's the only one that's really in contention from what I found online. What do you think?
I think it might be. I think I discovered Meryl Streep in Death Becomes Her.
I haven't seen that.
So it's an older film, so it is a film that has aged, I think, but it's a great film. So I do think so. But
it's
she
the
has
most
been in a
fun.
lot.
It's the most fun one.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Kramer versus Kramer or Sophie's Choice are not fun movies.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I like a film that's fun, and I want a film to make me feel good at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe.
So now let's move on to the script. The way the book worked is she put together a proposal for the book to publishers, and that went out. And usually movie studios keep their ear to the ground on stuff like that. And it seems like everyone just loved the idea of Anna Wintour's ex-assistant writing a revenge book. So it was a very appealing. So even before the book was written, Fox optioned it. And then they started writing the script based on just the first 100 pages of the book. So it seems like at the beginning, they literally just took the idea of you're the assistant to Anna Wintour, didn't even know what the story was going to be, and they just started writing. But this is when it became a Zoolander type movie. And this is probably when Rachel McAdams was approached the first time and was like, no, I don't want to be female Zoolander. It got rewritten multiple times by 4 different screenwriters.
Okay.
And the director, David Frankel, got approached a couple of times. And he wasn't a big deal or anything like that. He was like mostly doing TV or music videos. But he didn't like the silly version. And I think they finally managed to lock him down because he had a bunch of notes. He was like, we need to make Miranda a more likable character. She can't just be this one-dimensional villain, which obviously we think is so important. And so they got a 4th screenwriter who came along, a woman, which I think is very important as well, who really understood the idea of what David Frankel wanted about this coming of age story, about Andy growing in the way we've talked about, but also making Miranda not the villain. I mean, some people argue that Miranda is the heroine of the movie because it is about what it takes to be great, which I think is the big great thing about this movie is that you can look at it from so many different angles. Yeah. But that angle exists, and that was a really important thing. So anyway, it took a lot of work to get the script to where it needed to be, but obviously they nailed it because it's a great story with a great plot and great quotes. And this is what the whole pyramid thing, you could have a great story that's entertaining with good actors, and it could still be a 3.5, 4, maybe even a 4.5, but having banger lines is just like that, just takes you to the next level. So what are some of your favorite quotes?
Oh, where do we begin? I think most of the main quotes come from 2 characters, Miranda and Emily, of course. They're also quotable to the point where I have overdone it, and the second film needs to come out, so I've got some more material to under my wing.
Which one would you say? Which doesn't have to be your favorite, but which one would you say you quote in everyday life the most?
Are those the Chanel boots? You could basically use that every time you buy a new pair of shoes, and someone will go those, and I'll just interrupt them from saying and say, yes, they're the Chanel boots. But I have used that too many times, and now I can't use that anymore. Yeah, that's a great one. Obviously, florals for spring, groundbreaking. I basically think of that every time I see a floral item, anything, because I see just again the delivery.
What is it she says exactly? Groundbreaking.
Yeah, florals for spring, groundbreaking. It's just the pause, the breath. It's just great. And that's a classic Miranda. That's all, which is obviously said throughout the film. I don't use that in real life because it probably get me punched in the face. But it's definitely a good one. And then the other one is from Emily, where she goes, "Oh, sorry. Do you have some prior commitment to go to some hideous skirt convention or something like that?"
Yeah, no,
it's just so good. It's just those like hot bitchy lines that Emily seems to just get away with that you just love to listen to.
Yeah. Do you have some prior commitments? Some hideous skirt convention you have to go to? Yeah. So I love A Million Girls Would Kill for this is just a good one because it in one sentence explains Andy's entire motivation. And as I said, I think they use it perfectly 3 times. No need to overdo it. Another really good one, both on quote and acting, is and you have no style or sense of fashion. Well, I think that depends on what you... No. That wasn't a question. That's just brilliant.
One of the first lines from Emily is when when Andy's arriving for her interview and she's got the briefcase. And Emily's like, "Don't let her see that.
Yeah.
It's foul."
Oh, and I love
just look and snatch it off her.
And I love both the word, but also the how he plays it. Nigel in that scene when she's arriving, I think he's got a clipboard, and he goes, "What's that?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Don't even get me started on it." It's such a strong introduction to the two of them.
Yeah, definitely.
We've talked about the sweater scene, so there's a lot of quotes in there, but the ending is strong. You're wearing a sweater that was selected by you, by the people in this room, I think is a good embodiment of what
from a pile of stuff.
Yes, yeah. Embodiment of what all that is.
Yeah.
Then I like, again, for me with quotes, I used to study English literature, we had we would read Shakespeare or whatever, and we would highlight quotes, like, maybe 50 or 100 in the whole book. And then we would have quotation tests. The whole point was that in the test, they give us 4 or 5, and you have to write maybe a couple of paragraphs explaining them. And to me, obviously there are quotes that are just funny, intrinsically funny, that we don't have to explain. But for me, a good quote combines that, but also that there's meaning behind it so that you could talk about it for 2 minutes or write a paragraph. And so one of them is during the Miami flight thing, and she says, "Please, I don't know, it's drizzling." And that would embody the fact that she just minimizes everything and doesn't understand the importance. But then again, both on it's funny, but also there's a lot to read into it. Later on, the dad says, "What does she want you to do? Have the National Guard airlift her?" "Of course not." "Could I do that?" Yeah. And that's actually one of Andy's funnier bits, I think, as well.
Yeah, Andy doesn't have many comical lines.
She's
almost the butt of the joke.
Yeah. She's a straight man. I love the "go ahead, take a chance, hire the smart fat girl."
Yeah, that's another reference to body image again.
I think stuff like that. And even the Nigel, it's addressing, because you can't not address it in a fashion movie, but by saying that, it's showing how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, it's outrageous. Like, you would never say that to a person in real life.
Yeah.
And I think it just pokes the fun at the
idea that someone who's a completely normal weight, who's small, is actually...
that's the most outrageous thing as well, is that she's fine. But even if she wasn't, it's just, you wouldn't say that. But the film and the characters just seem to get away with it, and you kind of find it funny for some reason. It's quite hard to do that, I think.
I think, and this I only realized it on the last rewatch, but again, because it sounds good, but it's so meaningful. It's probably one of my favorite lines, which I already brought up, is where so many people would die to work, you only deign to work. I think it's just perfect.
Yeah.
Then I mentioned the Lily. You know what? She has a good line, and it's pretty, if you want to just talk about the fun side of the movie. This is a fun one, but it's also really meaningful, is when she goes to the James Holt meeting, and he compliments the bag I think she's wearing, and he says, who made this fantastic thing, and she knows you. That just shows you that Andy knows her shit now. Because if that had happened a month before, she'd be like, I had no idea.
Well, she didn't know who Miranda Priestly was.
Exactly. Whereas now she knows the person that designed the bag that she's wearing.
I really do think that that's one thing that Andy would have known who Miranda was. If she wants to be a journalist, she would have known who.
Well, here's the irony. Everyone knows.
Obviously, it should be just trying to build the character that she's clueless about fashion.
Okay, but here's the thing. You say that why? Because everyone knows who Anna Wintour is, right?
Yeah.
Why does everyone know who Anna Wintour is? Because of this movie.
No.
I guarantee. This is the thing. People forget that she was. I mean, obviously she was famous in the industry. Do you know who the editor-in-chief of the New York Times is?
No.
I don't.
Maybe. Okay, you're right. It proved me wrong, but. Yes, this is probably.
I can't name you a single other person. I can't tell you who the head of. I can't tell you anyone who ever worked at Elle. I can't tell you the editor in chief of any other publication in the world. But everyone knows Anna Wintour because of that movie. But at the time, outside of that industry, I think I get your point.
Yeah,
but I think
Anna Wintour is definitely more. She's out on the fashion runways. Like she's definitely in the media a lot more. My point is just that. Andy was a journalist.
She
worked for a
serious journalist.
She would have known that Runway was part of Elias Publications, for example, if she wanted to be an aspiring journalist. But it's just done for dramatic effect. That she's just like, I know nothing about fashion other than this blue sweater that I'm wearing.
I think this is one of my favorite. Miranda, did you fall down and smack your little head on the pavement?
I've got that down.
Again, the way she says it, smack your little head on the pavement, is just so perfect. Oh, and she even says, not that I can recall. And then when she refers to Emily as having an incubus of viral plague, it's just very dramatic.
The other ones for Miranda are like, is there a reason my coffee isn't here? Has she died? She doesn't even care if her assistant is dead. That's crazy.
Then, and this is the one, I saw a recent-ish video with Anne Hathaway and Emily Blunt, and they were talking about the lines that people ask them to say all the time, and Emily says that the one that she has asked the most is I'm on a new diet, it's very effective, I don't eat anything, and then when I feel like I'm about to faint, I eat a cube of cheese.
That's the most requested line that she has to say. That wasn't even in my top 5, actually. The ones that I like are where one of my other favourites from Emily is when she makes Andy do the coat, and she's like, "You do the coat." She really, really wants to not do the coat. She's the second assistant. She's higher. She doesn't do the coat anymore.
Exactly. She's bigger and better things. Then the face it, Andy, you sold your soul the day you put on those Jimmy shoes.
Yeah.
That it's a good line.
It's a good line.
But it's by Emily. It's like, well, what is she saying, that she shouldn't have put on the Jimmy shoes?
Yeah, I had forgotten about that until you'd said it.
Then when Nigel gets fucked over and he says she'll get me back, you sure about that? Nope. But I hope for the best. That's you. That's you. How you feel about the sequel? You hope for the best.
Yeah, maybe that's one of the opening. Yeah.
And then, so the final one, biggest one, has got to be that, oh, don't be ridiculous, Andrea. Everybody wants this. Everybody wants to be us.
Yeah, but not Andy.
No, not Andy. I find this goes well with the quotes, is the themes in the movie. So, competency, trying hard, being pushed beyond your comfort zone. We've covered that. I think that's a big one. Price of success.
The price of success.
You need to sacrifice things and you don't have to. Not everyone can become Amanda Priestly, but if that's who you want to be, then you can't be friends with everyone. You're gonna break some eggs. Then growing up, the push and pull of the person that you once were versus the person you're trying to be. And I think people always see like, oh, I'm gonna do this job so I can become a journalist, and I'm gonna be like, never ever does it happen that you say, whether it's 1 year or 10 years, this is the person I want to be. But you don't understand that to be some part of that, you're going to need to sacrifice something else, and you're going to need to change other parts of you. And
when you're young, you just
you're like, oh, I can
think you're going to have it all.
You can say, I'm going to stay the exact same person, but I'm going to be good at a job and get paid more. It's like, well, that comes with other things. So in this case, is that you need to be ruthless and hyper competent and all of that. And yeah, this is a bit. So I'll be honest, I use ChatGPT sometimes. Like, just I put stuff in and have a conversation. Like some of the themes, I was like, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And one of them that they suggested I think I mentioned before, one of the themes of the movie is how the institutions shape behavior. Like I mentioned with like Trump or whatever, about how someone can go in to this machine, this institution, and gradually, whether it's body shaming or whether it's about you need to be fashionable or whether it's about you need, and some of them are good, like being competent and being timely and forward thinking and smart and all that, and some of them are obviously bad and unhealthy, like the food stuff. But yeah, so that I think is a big thing, because it's easy to criticize from the outside, but anyone who has ever worked in any sort of institute, even honestly, I run my own company, but I work with clients, and you go in meetings and you hear stuff, and you start drinking the Kool-Aid of thinking in a particular corporate kind of way.
Yeah, for sure. It kind of, you become moldable, especially at a young age.
Exactly. The Devil Wears Prada isn't about fashion. It's about how success slowly changes your values before you realize it. And then I think the biggest one for me is nuance. Like, people say, oh, Miranda's the worst, Miranda's the best, Nate is terrible, Nate is... Well, no one says that he's, like, great or whatever.
Yeah,
but it's the fact that at the end of the day,
there
there isn't a single person in this... Well, except maybe for Nigel. But there's no one here who's perfect. There's no one here who's completely terrible. And that's, like, to me, again, that's the sign of a smart movie. It's... These are all great movies, but it's very easy in Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or The Matrix to have these are the good guys and these are the bad. Harry Potter, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. But that's not life. Life is nuanced. It's good people who make mistakes. It's bad people who sometimes do the odd good thing and maybe treat you right. It's people who are really good at one thing, running a magazine, and really bad at another thing, treating people decently. So yeah. Let's move on to the production. So we've hit on a lot of this before, but from a branding point of view, so some of the biggest brands that I noticed are do you notice the bag that Miranda wears, the first shot of her getting out of the car?
Yes, it's Prada isn't it?
Bag, yeah. Lincoln Town cars are used by Andy and everyone, but Miranda goes around in a Mercedes. We've talked about the Hermes scarves. Yeah. Valentino. Chanel is probably one of the most mentioned brands.
I think Chanel Andy wears a lot of Chanel.
Yes.
After she's had her transformation, you can see that she feels heavily sponsored at that point, but it really does go very well with her look, I think.
I think I mentioned the director had worked on Sex and the City. He'd also worked on Entourage. So Adrian Grenier, Nate, is obviously the star of Entourage, which that's the highlight of his career, and he's perfect as that silly character. It's the fact that he has to do anything serious here that I think is the problem. But yeah, the director he made Marley and Me after this. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have seen that. That's a very sad film. Yeah.
Weirdly, it's one of those I watched once years ago, and I know obviously everyone references it as one of the saddest movies ever.
If you have a dog, it's extremely sad.
But when we rewatched it, at least the dog does grow up. In my mind, I thought the dog died when it was still really young. No. It is still very sad. Yeah. But other than that, the movies that he's made, I recognize some of them. I haven't seen any of them. You might not even have heard of them. He is making The Devil Wears Prada too. But the point is, he's not one of those directors that then suddenly, like, his career did not go the way of Emily Blunt's or Anne Hathaway's, which is interesting because I think he did a great job in this.
Yeah.
The fashion. So we talked about the budget and all the free stuff.
Unclear about the budget. But I imagine that lots of things were borrowed. Obviously,
well, as I said,
a team of designers
from a product placement point of view, you get, especially in a fashion movie, you get given a bunch of stuff. Here's one question on the outfits before we do the fun part of our best and worst. Nigel's ring.
Oh yes.
Let's talk about Nigel's ring. I like it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if how does it work to you from a fashion point of view? Because it's quite bold.
It is quite bold.
And he wears it all the time.
He's quite a bold character.
Yeah.
I think he needs that in his kind of look, I think. I always look, when you go back to that era, you look at all the other characters and you go back to that era, accessories are everywhere. That everyone's wearing loads of necklaces, belts, sunglasses. It's just it's the era of accessories.
Yeah, and he can't
be exempt from that.
Yeah, and he's often wearing a tie.
Yeah, he's always wearing a suit.
So
basically,
he needs the jewelry there.
Yeah, I think it works just because it's Nigel.
Yeah, I tried to research if there was any story. There are people tried to make replicas of it and stuff. So it's definitely something that people are aware of, but it's not that there's no theories, there's no strong opinions one way or the other. So, best outfits and worst outfits. Should we start with best or worst?
Let's go with the best.
Okay,
so my favorite outfit is, of course, the Chanel boots.
That's the one that Giselle compliments.
Yeah, so she's got the Chanel blazer on, and she's got the Chanel boots.
So that's So I have that in my top three. The order doesn't really matter.
But there's another one.
Yeah, the Chanel boots and the approval one, the one where Miranda. So yeah, I love those two. And then there's obviously a lot that we see really quickly. I quite like the bandana one.
Oh no, no!
I didn't think you would like that.
No, I don't like that one.
Okay, so what's your third best one?
My third best one is the all white look. In the same scene with Andy, and she's got the all white coat.
And the hat.
and the Baker Boy hat,
Yeah,
and
I
the
don't like
gloves.
that
I
one.
think that
Yeah.
still would work today.
This one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I've got
the
that one in my worst.
Oh, the worst.
I don't like it. I just think
I think it would still work. If you've seen someone walking through New York wearing that today,
I mean, I wouldn't be
you wouldn't
shocked.
think they were stuck in
but
2006.
I don't. Yeah, but and then
I think there's much worse than that.
okay. What are your worst then?
My worst ones are, I call it the Devil, which is a Miranda outfit where she's got the red fur coat on and the
When's
belt.
that? Is that during the montage? Or...
No, it's one of
Do you have a
the.
screenshot of that one?
It's her entrance to the.
I don't even remember when that one is.
So the Devil one, yes, is one of my worst. I think it makes Miranda look like the Cruella de Vil.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
true, yeah.
Cruella and the Muppets and
Yeah.
Miranda combined. It's just quite a lot. It's almost bad that it's good. But
yeah, but
I do think there's also a lot of belts in the, as I keep referencing, all these accessories, and I think it's done intentionally to just heighten the fashion and really make it quite camp and enjoyable. But yeah, I think it's it's quite gross. The other ones I don't like is the cerulean blue sweater. They really,
but we're not counting that. We're counting
Yeah.
the ones where she's trying.
Yeah, the Miranda. Sorry, they really made her look very dowdy for that one. And then another one I don't like is there's another one with Miranda, and she's wearing the is Miranda purple fur.
So those are all your worst ones.
Yes, there's a lot going on in that one. I think that they started to run out of looks for Miranda at a certain point, and they were like, "How can we keep this evil boss look?" Because there's a whole coat montage of her dumping coats onto.
Yeah, I think you don't even see the outfits.
No, you just see fur.
fur.
Yeah, but this one is purple stripy fur with leopard print blouse and the sunglasses. It kind of looks like if Pat Butcher ran Vogue. I think it's kind of not great. But again, it's bad, but it's also very high end still in a way that when you watch it today, it kind of still works in a weird way. I think, as I say, there's a lot of posts about the worst fashions of Devil Wears Prada, but I do think it's done intentionally for sure.
Yeah, but I also think, as you say, once you do 50 looks, even if you're trying to make them more good, some of them aren't going to work as well.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's fashion. Not everyone's going to like it.
This one isn't shocking, but I find this one pretty. To me, that seems like something that old Andy would have worn.
That is giving like Walmart mum, isn't it?
and I know I texted you, but then the one I really don't like is the full outfit. It's the hat is mostly.
You disliked it so much that you had to text me about it.
Yeah, I do. It's the hat. It's mostly the hat. But I also think the off the shoulder sweater thing just looks terrible.
Yeah,
and
with
it's
the
very
shirt.
very of its time.
Yeah, that is very of its time, and it's a lot of accessories. It's a shirt with a jumper.
Yeah,
it's almost that part of that decade. It's part of that decade where Office in the club.
Yeah.
Fashion,
That's
and
exactly it.
like girls wore blazers and heels. Guys, we had to wear shirts and smart shoes. If your feet didn't hurt at the end of the night, it wasn't a good time. But yeah, that was very off its time, and it's kind of there's definitely a lot going on with that one. But you kind of enjoy it in some way because
it doesn't upset me, but I just if that's what came to mind with me as soon as we discussed doing a worst outfit. Music. So I've some podcasts I've listened to think the music isn't great because it's iconic artists, but it's not necessarily their best songs. But I think that's actually a good thing because the music feels familiar.
Yeah.
But you never get distracted like, oh, that was the number one hit from that year or whatsoever. And especially on my last watch, I think that not necessarily even the songs, but sometimes just the score, they're really appropriate for the moment. I think it adds a lot to the whether it's tension or whether it's comedy or whether it's heartfelt moments. So yeah, I think the music's really good.
Yeah, for sure. Madonna, come on.
Yeah,
it's upbeat. It's familiar.
Yeah,
obviously I think it is a bit cheesy that they use Madonna Vogue when it's about Vogue, interpretation of the Vogue magazine, but it kind of works because it's just upbeat and it's a montage. You're kind of semi-distracted by what's going on.
Yeah, I've had it as very cheesy 2000s, but without cheapening it. And then the sets, so we talked about how it's mostly filmed in New York. Apparently a lot of the Paris, they spent like 2 days in Paris, but most of the Paris stuff was the interior Paris stuff was all filmed back in the US.
Makes sense.
This is a fun one. Someone from the production team managed to sneak into the Vogue office around the time of shooting, and I don't think he took pictures, but by memory he sketched all of the stuff out. So apparently Miranda's off. He managed to see Anna Wintour's actual office, and he got it so right in the movie that Anna Wintour, after seeing it, had her office redecorated because she felt like...
Of course she did. Of course, that makes no surprise there.
And then I mentioned about the fact that it was hard to get the townhouse because of the fact that
No one would allow.
Exactly.
Yeah, that just surprised me a little bit, surely, because obviously you can get paid for that.
I mean, they did eventually, but I'm sure it happened a couple of times that people were like, no, we would rather not, because I'm sure Vogue spent a lot of money on townhouses rentals for shoots and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
actually, those people probably had good income and they didn't want to burn their bridges with Anna Wintour.
But yeah, I think the editing's really good, whether it's the montages and everything. You know, it's not the sort of thing that jumps out that it's like, oh, it's the best edited movie ever, but I think it works really well.
Yeah, it's worked.
Well, this takes us nicely to our recap. So we're going to try and bring together everything that we've talked about and just kind of summarize why we love this movie. And we'll each do it by saying where it ranks for us. So do you want to go first and just say roughly where it ranks for you and why?
So I would say that this is a top 3 movie for me. I think mainly because of how many times I've watched it, it warrants that space. But also I think that it's very of its time, of that feel-good noughties movie where it's about a main character moving to America, in a city in America from a small town, and trying to make it and realizing, you know, what really matters at the end of the day and following their dreams. It's just very, very familiar storyline that we have that is very comforting, and that kind of what makes me do it. Another film that I think about is Coyote Ugly, which is obviously sort of part of that decade where it's similar storyline. I think there's definitely some comparisons in terms of the characters that are in there. So it just kind of feel like a story that we already know, and I think that's why I like it. I think it's a good example of some of those stories. So yeah, that's why I feel like it's in my top 3.
Love that. So it's in my top 100, which is no small feat, but I have it at number 68.
Okay,
so
quite a jump. It
is. I feel like it sounds like I'm being really harsh, but you've got to remember, like, I've seen thousands of movies, and I'm still saying it's in the 100 best ones. So just to give you an idea, the basically anytime I'm doing a movie on the pod, I'm trying to assign it a position. Obviously, at first it's easy. Eventually, there might be a time where, you know, I maybe put something at number 50 and this moves down to 69 or whatever. But for now, in the provisional list, I'm putting it at 68. And it's right behind Titanic and Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
As Lord of the Rings is a franchise, and just ahead of Legends of the Fall and American Gangster. Okay. So it does not in any way offend me that you're putting it top 3. For me, every movie in my top 100 I love by definition. But to me, then it comes out of, like, did I see it at a certain age? Do I relate to certain characters on a personal level, or is it so? Like, for example, a movie like Coach Carter, I have it higher on this list. I play basketball. I saw that movie when I was younger. I get really emotional when I watch it. I love Samuel L. Jackson's performance in it almost as much as I love Meryl Streep's in this. But it's because it hits close to home, I have it higher. Even though I will every day of the week say that objectively, The Devil Wears Prada is a better movie than Coach Carter. But yeah, so that was kind of the not negative, but the why it's not higher on the list. But the reason it's on the list is because it's a perfect... So I think, as I've explained, this is the epitome of the pyramid. It's entertaining. It's got a great story. Yeah. It's got great characters and actors. It's got a great script, and it's well produced. And it has these themes that we've talked about, which for me are a big part of really making a movie a 5 out of 5. But the other way I've looked at it is that it's a perfect team performance. It's Meryl Streep as the MVP. She's like the LeBron James, Michael Jordan. She's scoring 40 points, taking it over. But then you've got 2 great bench players in Emily and Nigel. And then you've got your team captain, Anne Hathaway, Andy, as I talked about, linchpin, holding it all together, and all of that in a fascinating world. You know, I guess I said fashion isn't my number one passion, but I'm interested enough to find this interesting. But yeah, so just so many things going for it. And when you get into the top 100, it's literally tiny personal preferences to me that kind of move something from a top 10 to a top 20. But yeah, I love it. And it's so actually I forgot to say this, Bill Simmons of the Rewatchables podcast, who is considered, he's nicknamed the Podfather because he's so big on podcasts and movie podcasts and stuff. He named The Devil Wears Prada as his most rewatchable movie of the 21st century. Not his favorite, but just the one that he had watched the most with his mostly because of his family, because he has a daughter and a wife who love it. And it is so rewatchable. Sometimes when I'm preparing for this and I watch the movie over and over, I'm always like, even though I love the movie, like, do I really want to rewatch this movie 3 times in a week type of thing? But honestly, if I had more time, I would have watched it the third and fourth time, because A, it's so easy to watch, and B, there's so many details. Like I was thinking, oh, I want to see about Lily, whether she says this, or like, let's catch if Emily, like there's just so much, you can go as deep or as shallow as you want on it, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, it's definitely very rewatchable. That is why it's in my top 3. Say, I'm not as big as a movie buff as you are, which is why you got top 100. I don't think I can even name 100 films, to be honest.
I'm sure you could if you tried, but yes.
I really don't think I could, but as I said, it's quite memorable. It's so rewatchable, and yes, there's so many of the better films out there that have special effects, or they have a much more heart-wrenching story, or something that's maybe more relatable to someone, but it is extremely rewatchable. But
I think
it generates memes still today. The kind of shots of Miranda, you can basically write anything on that and create a meme. Like, it's there, ready, willing, next. So that you've got, if you're writing a meme using all of that, you should thank Meryl Streep.
Absolutely. Well, James, I want to thank you so much for coming on and doing
thank you for having
this
me.
endeavor. It's been really good fun.
Yeah, it's been great.
Loved getting your side of it. And I think there's only one way to end this podcast with, that's all.